Introduction. As we find ourselves growing older, many of us may also find ourselves as caregivers for our aging parents. Or perhaps we have a close friend who's now requiring the help of a caregiver. It's not unusual for these situations to set off fears associated with our own aging. There are those of us who have seen a parent or a loved one suffering from the symptoms of Alzheimer's disease or other forms of dementia. We may find ourselves fearing that the same thing could happen to us. There are so many issues associated with aging. Everything from memory loss to falling and having an injury that causes us to be more dependent on others. Perhaps you've noticed that your empathy for a friend's suffering has aroused your fears about almost everything that might affect your own life. And given the economic instability we've witnessed in recent years, perhaps you fear that you won't have enough money to live independently and possibly lose your ability to make choices about how you live. Any one of us might put together a list of fears that we're imagining. It's been our experience that the biggest fear most of us have, either consciously or unconsciously, is the fear of dying. And on top of everything else, we're all bombarded by the media about how important it is to look and act as if we were years younger than our biological age, as if the reality of our age was something of which we should be ashamed. The purpose of this book is to share with you that there's another way of looking at the world and another way of looking at the aging process. You don't have to fear that you're a victim of your aging. All of our negative, fearful attitudes can be changed by healing our attitudes. In the pages ahead, we'll explore how each of us has an opportunity to live the latter years of our lives with inner peace, happiness, and tranquility, regardless what may be happening to our bodies and our minds. We'll discover that all our fears about aging are reversible and that love is more powerful than fear. This book focuses on unconditionally forgiving others and ourselves as the key to happiness and inner peace, and that we experience love when we actually let go of fear. Chapter 1. Attitude is Everything. We know that our happiness and how well we feel we have lived our lives is not determined by the level of our education or by how much money we have or by how many things we have amassed. It's not determined by the job titles or positions we've held. Neither is it determined by the number of friends we have made or by the experiences we've had in the past. Happiness and feeling good about the lives we're now living are most profoundly determined by the attitudes we hold in our minds. Actually, how we experience everything in our lives is ultimately determined by our attitudes. Healing our attitudes becomes a major stepping stone toward enjoying a happy and a fulfilling life. Attitudinal healing is based on the premise that ultimately it's not other people or events or experiences in the past that's causing us to be upset and stressed out. It's our thoughts, attitudes, and judgments about those things that cause our distress. We may not be able to change others, and we know we cannot change the past, but we can change our perceptions of these in the present. As we get older, we may be prone to worrying more, or maybe we become more impatient, complaining, and short-tempered. We may find that happiness is more difficult to experience, and we may start to feel that our physical and mental capabilities are slowly diminishing. Is it possible that our culture is putting too much emphasis on our bodies and not enough focus on the thoughts and attitudes that we put into our minds? Is it possible that there is another way of looking at the world and our beliefs about our bodies, our minds, and our spirits? Is it possible that our true reality is spiritual and not physical? And is it possible that we have unintentionally created a fearful ego mind that makes us afraid that when we die, it's the end of life? What would happen to our fears of so many things, including aging, if we started to believe that perfect love has the power to cast out all fear? Is it possible that our attitudes play a pivotal role in determining how we deal with life, health, and aging? And is it possible that our attitudes help to determine whether our relationships are loving and peaceful or full of conflict and fear? The most important gift we are given. Perhaps the most important gift that the universe has given us is the freedom to choose what thoughts and attitudes we put in our minds. Are you willing to imagine what would happen to you and to the life you live if you truly thought it was of value to believe that love can heal any problem you now have or any problem that you will have in the future? By changing our belief system, by letting love become more important than fear, we can grow older with grace and be happy and peaceful inside, regardless of what's happening on the outside or even the condition of our bodies. The essence of our being. In our work in attitudinal healing over the last 4 decades, we utilize 12 principles of practical spirituality. The first principle is the essence of our being is love. To us, this means that our true reality is more than these temporary bodies in which we live. We are unconditional love, a formless, never-ending energy of light that is part of all that is and can never be extinguished. We've chosen to believe that by changing our own belief system and having faith and trust in a higher power, love becomes the answer to all of our problems and to all the fears of aging or any other fears we may be hanging on to. As we choose to change our belief system, love, our spiritual core, becomes our only reality. When we experience a moment of healing through the higher consciousness of forgiving the world, our past, ourselves, and everybody else, and by giving our unconditional love to help another, all judgments, grievances, and fears can begin to fade away. When we're in this healing moment, we're not focusing on the past or the future. We're living only in that present instant of unconditional love and peace, where there is no fear about anything. It's our fear, judgments, and guilt that block us from experiencing love as our true and natural state of being. The gift of loving another person without any judgments is one of the greatest gifts we can give to another or ourselves. A few years ago, an 82-year-old woman came to see Jerry. She'd moved to a nearby retirement community from Southern California specifically because she wanted to start an Aging with Attitude support group at her new home and wanted Jerry to help. Within a short time, the group was started with seniors from ages 65 to 94. Many of the members felt anxious and depressed about the future, while others had both physical and cognitive challenges. As the group continued throughout the years, many of these symptoms reportedly lessened. It was our impression that because the members of the group were feeling both helpful and useful to others, that they received as much as they gave, and the attitudinal healing was palpable. Through forgiveness, many who formerly were complainers stopped complaining. They frequently forgave their adult children and other family members who were not in contact with them as much as they would have liked. And overall, they were happier and were messengers of love and forgiveness wherever they went. About that time, there was a popular national television program called The Hugh Downs Show. It was about people in advanced years finding happiness. Our people went on the show with Jerry. They shared their experiences that by changing their attitudes, they succeeded in literally changing their lives. They taught others all around the country that we can be happy and peaceful regardless of our age, circumstances, what is happening to our bodies, or what limitations we may have in our lives. They also pointed out how important forgiveness is for removing the blocks to love and peace, and how quickly love replaces fear when we forgive others or ourselves. They demonstrated that when each morning they committed to have a happy day, no matter what happened in that day, they usually ended up having a happy day. Learning to create healthier attitudes is a way of having more peace and harmony each day. We found the following guidelines can be extremely helpful in changing our attitudes about the way we look at the world. And rather than focusing on our own fears around aging, it can be helpful to ask ourselves throughout the day, in what ways can I be more loving and helpful to others? How can I be a better listener? How can I be more accepting, more compassionate, and less judgmental? Healing our attitudes is the process of the following: seeing the value of consciously choosing peace instead of conflict in every situation. Choosing love instead of fear. Choosing patience instead of impulsivity. Choosing to be gentle to others and ourselves. Choosing to be a love finder instead of a fault finder. Choosing to be a love giver rather than a love seeker. Choosing to count our smiling wrinkles instead of our aging wrinkles. And deciding each day to teach and demonstrate unconditional love. For more information on attitudinal healing, including a mini course for life, go to www.ahinternational.org.
Congratulations! Simply by listening to this first session, you've taken a critical first step toward improving your life, a step others neglect. You see, we know that if you get just one great idea from this program, it will be worth many times over the price you pay. Plus, the ideas we share will benefit you for a lifetime. It is as simple as listening, learning, and applying these great ideas and techniques in your life. When you do, you'll see real and significant improvements immediately. At this moment, you're probably feeling excited, inspired, motivated, empowered, and most importantly, ready to apply the information you've just heard. We at Nightingale Conant want you to keep that feeling going today, tomorrow, and for the rest of your life, and use it to create the life of your dreams. But we know that's not always easy to do. I'm going to share with you a simple yet extremely effective secret that will help you to maintain the motivation you're feeling right now and really achieve the goals that first inspired you to listen to this program. It's called the Online Mission Statement Builder. In just 5 short minutes, this free, easy-to-use online service will give you a detailed, clearly defined, printed statement of your life's mission that will give you the power to truly accomplish any goal, spiritual, personal, or financial. Your mission statement will be like a guiding light, keeping you focused on what's important, the person you're becoming, the life you dream of, and the goals you plan on achieving, so your life unfolds exactly the way you want it to. Use this free service now, and you'll immediately propel yourself toward the achievement of your goals and dreams. I know, because thousands of people have already taken this opportunity and experienced rapid and dramatic life transformations as a result. This is your invitation to be next. If you're committed to having more, doing better, and living life to the absolute fullest, and you'd like to achieve those goals in record time, simply visit our website at www.nightingale.com/mission statement to begin the process. That's www.nightingale.com/mission statement. Remember, there is no cost for this powerful service and no obligation, but I do urge you to visit www.nightingale.com/mission statement now. If you hesitate, the momentum you feel now may fade away over the days and weeks to come. That's what happens to most people. They let their hopes and dreams pass them by. Please don't let that be you. It's been said the path to success is to take massive, determined action. Take action now by continuing on to the next session. For 50 years, we've seen firsthand how our products empower people to be, do, and have more in life. But it only works if you continue to listen, learn, and act. Thank you for listening to this Nightingale Conant audio program. Enjoy the rest of this program.
Chapter 2. Forgiveness is the key to happiness. As we age, there's more fear about the possible declining abilities of our bodies and the diminished capacity of our minds. Along with this, we can be preoccupied with fears about facing our own dying. Maybe we worry more about how many years we have left, or whether we're going to have pain or be alone when we pass. Sometimes we can have a tendency to blame the world and to feel that the world is unfair. Perhaps we want our loved ones nearby in our last days, but fear they might not be there. All these fears and more can mount up to judgments that can cause us to feel unwanted, unappreciated, and unloved. Worrying and being fearful doesn't help us resolve these fears, and it doesn't bring us more peace. On the contrary, our fearfulness makes us distressed and unhappy. Getting older doesn't have to be associated with fear, unhappiness, or the loss of inner peace. We can turn things around when we develop an attitude of forgiveness rather than fear. The most important gift that we have is the ability to choose what thoughts we have in our minds and what attitudes we hold about others. And forgiveness can play an important role in bringing about a new way of experiencing our own lives. Forgiveness, the Greatest Healer of All, by Gerald Jampolsky. To forgive is the prescription for happiness. To not forgive is the prescription to suffer. Is it possible that all pain, regardless of its cause, has some component of unforgiveness in it? To hold on to vengeful thoughts and to withhold our love and compassion certainly must interfere with our health and our immune system. Holding on to what we call justified anger interferes with our experiencing inner peace. To forgive doesn't mean agreeing with the act. It doesn't mean condoning an outrageous behavior. Forgiveness means no longer living in the fearful past. Forgiveness means no longer scratching the wounds so they continue to bleed. Forgiveness means living and loving completely in the present, without the shadows of the past or the fear of the future. Forgiveness means freedom from anger and attack thoughts. Forgiveness means letting go of all hopes for a better past. Forgiveness means not excluding your love from anyone. Forgiveness means healing the hole in your heart caused by unforgiving thoughts. Forgiveness means seeing the light in everyone, regardless of their behavior. Forgiveness is not just for the other person. It's for ourselves and the mistakes we've made and the guilt and shame we still hold on to. Forgiveness in the deepest sense is forgiving ourselves for separating ourselves from one another. To forgive this very instant means no longer being king or queen of the procrastinators club. It's never too early to forgive, and it's never too late to forgive. How long does it take to forgive? It depends on your belief system. If you believe it'll happen, it'll happen. If you believe it'll take 6 months, it'll take 6 months. If you believe it'll take but a second, that's all it will take. We believe with all our hearts that peace will come to the world when each of us takes the responsibility of forgiving everyone, including ourselves, completely. Why we do not want to forgive. When we choose not to forgive, it's usually because our fearful ego minds tempt us to believe that if we forgive someone, it's an act of weakness. Not forgiving is a waste of time because it does not control the other person or prevent them from doing the same unforgivable things again. But if you forgive someone, you'll feel more secure. These are common reasons we buy into as to why we do not forgive. The ego mind does not want us to feel at peace and wants to entrap us into believing that there is only a past and future rather than seeing the benefit of living in the present. The ego wants us to live in the hurtful past and to predict that the future will be just the same. The ego's enemy is inner peace. It believes that you can find security when you hurt someone else back after you've been hurt by them. In previous decades, forgiveness was never mentioned in a physician's training. Times have changed. We've given lectures and held seminars in numerous medical schools on the role of forgiveness in medicine, and today it's much more commonplace. When I, Jerry, became legally blind in both eyes, there was a temptation coming from my fearful ego to find someone or something to blame. It was tempting to blame my body or my genes and to have anger towards my body. One of the key principles of attitudinal healing is that forgiveness is the key to happiness. Remembering this, I changed my mind and chose to no longer make my body and my eyes my enemy. I forgave my body for not being what I wanted it to be. We find that frequently people at our stage of life are still holding on to unforgiving thoughts about themselves or others. This can interfere often with the effectiveness of the medication or the healing modality. It's amazing that when we become aware, even when we're in the process of dying, how important it is not to hold on to grievances of any kind. Preparation for retraining our minds begins with seeing the value of learning to quiet our minds so that we're not caught up in the busyness of the day. Using mindfulness training, or if you meditate, you might start there. Meditation simply means having a peaceful mind, which is our natural state, one that's tranquil and still. Clarity then becomes possible because there's no conflicting thoughts, judgments, or fears. Have a willingness to be open-minded as you review the following principles. Remind yourself that it's all right to disagree with or reject any of these thoughts. Forgiveness is a choice, and you don't have to forgive or even believe in forgiveness. But do your best to look at the consequences of your choice to forgive or not forgive, letting your heart help you decide. One key word, willingness, gives you the power to move ahead in the forgiveness process. This occurs when you go into action and say to yourself, with full trust, that there is great value in letting go of all your grievances and anger towards others and especially towards yourself. Decide that you are no longer going to suffer from the boomerang effect of your unforgiving thoughts. Remember that in forgiving, you are not agreeing with the other person or condoning their hurtful behavior. You may find it helpful to write a letter to the person you wish to forgive. Express all of your feelings and then tear up the letter. Believe that holding on to anger doesn't bring you what you really want. Believe that holding on to grievances and unforgiving thoughts is a way for you to suffer. Believe that everyone you meet is a teacher of patience. Recognize the value of giving up all your judgments. Believe that you have the power to choose the thoughts you put in your mind. Be clear that your only goal is peace of mind, not changing or punishing the other person. Be willing to count your blessings rather than your hurts. Rather than seeing people as attacking you, see them as fearful and giving you a call of help for love. Recognize that any emotional pain you feel at any moment is caused by your own thoughts about someone or something. Be willing to see this person who hurt you as one of your greatest teachers, giving you the opportunity to learn what forgiveness is all about. Remember that in the process of forgiving the other person, you are forgiving yourself. And last, enjoy the happiness and peace that comes from forgiving. As we get older, many of us find that we're separated from our families and holding on to grievances because, maybe our adult children are not visiting us enough. Whenever we're unhappy about any external situation or when something goes wrong, we often find someone else to blame. We helped people create the first attitudinal healing peer support groups for senior citizens where they feel valued and useful in helping others. They no longer see value in complaining or to holding on to judgments because they give and receive unconditional love within the group. When we feel loved and are giving that love away, we find that we are far happier and at peace with life. Other times, older adults complain that, as I was getting older, I believed I would be experiencing the golden years of my life. Instead, I'm feeling more challenges around my lessening independence and what appears to be the deterioration of my abilities and my body. There was a woman in her 80s who was waiting to be shown her room in her new senior living situation. The administrator who was accompanying her explained that it was their policy to get each person's approval. The woman smiled as he explained this. When he was done, she said, "Oh, that won't be necessary." Perplexed, the administrator said he wanted her to see the room to determine whether or not she liked it. She said, "Oh, I'm sure I will. You see, I already made up my mind that I would like it before I came here." We are never too old to heal our attitudes and change our minds about how we look at aging. Chapter 3. Change your mind about aging and change your life. Worrying and being fearful doesn't bring us resolution to any fears we have around aging, and it doesn't bring us more peace. On the contrary, worry and fear can make us feel distressed and unhappy, but it doesn't have to be this way. The most important gift that we have is the ability to choose the thoughts we have in our mind and what attitudes we hold about others. We can turn things around when we develop an attitude of forgiveness rather than fear. Phyllis Gerard. My mother, Phyllis, lived near us at the wonderful Redwoods Retirement Community in Mill Valley, California, until her passing at age 94. She was a beloved and remarkable woman who lived her life to the fullest by overcoming seemingly insurmountable odds. Where there was no love, she put love and then found love. Obstacles became challenges from which she never shied away. As the 14th of 16 children of Italian-American immigrant parents, Phyllis developed resilience and determined thinking on her own. She used these qualities to survive both physically and emotionally in very challenging times. When she was young, she had next to no say about her choices in life. She was denied an education beyond the 8th grade, even though she begged to go to high school like her other siblings. She was punished for playing the piano in her determined pursuit to learn. She was denied friends and non-work-related social interaction, and she longed to emulate her heroine, the aviator Amelia Earhart. Over the course of her life, Phyllis broke down barriers for herself and thus influenced her children to do the same. She often said to me, "Honey, don't let anyone ever limit your world." At age 75, and in the presence of all her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, She became the oldest woman to graduate from her college, Monterey Peninsula College, with high honors, I might add, and the first and only of her siblings to ever do so. She learned to play the piano and the organ, and even tried out the guitar. She was beloved beyond description by friends and members of her church and her community. In midlife, she overcame a fear of flying by learning how to fly a single-engine plane and solo. She overcame her fear of water and swimming by getting her 100-foot scuba diving certificate in her late 50s. Phyllis chose to always have an attitude of gratitude, regardless of her circumstances, and she was determined to make good choices for herself as she increased with age. Having a restricted childhood with so few choices, she valued her power to choose the thoughts she put in her mind, especially later in life, rather than complaining and holding on to grievances. Phyllis focused on being kind to everyone who worked where she lived, regardless of their position. She was grateful for life, her faith, and everyone and everything around her. In her last years, it was important for my siblings and me to know how she was doing and what was going on when we were not there, so that we could be advocates for her if and when necessary. When we asked her how she was doing, she always said, "Now remember, I'm not complaining, I'm just explaining." One of her favorite statements each day was, "Your attitude is everything." One can be happy and peaceful on the inside, regardless of what is happening to their body and regardless of their circumstances. In her final years, Phyllis began to have moderate and then more serious memory loss. Rather than being upset about these losses, as many of us are sometimes, Phyllis came up with this statement that impressed us tremendously. She said, "You know, not being able to remember, it's not all that bad. You see, I can no longer remember what I was upset about." Phyllis was nearly always in a state of gratitude. She always thanked the staff and everyone else, including her family, for all they did for her, even with the most seemingly insignificant deeds. We rarely saw her without a smile, even though her body was being ravaged with numerous internal maladies. One of her badges of honor is that she became so well after a year in hospice care that she was graduated out. Death was never an enemy to Phyllis, nor was she ever afraid of it. She had a few near-death experiences and knew that a continuation of life awaited her beyond the life of the body. While it was hard for her to leave us all here, she was ready to depart this life when the time finally came. One of the greatest gifts Phyllis gave us, next to her capacity to love unconditionally, was her comfort with death and dying. When times were tough, she often quoted the book, "Growing Old is Not for Sissies." While aging was challenging for her body and mind, Phyllis left us a legacy that has changed those that knew her in deep and profound ways. She was an amazing teacher of love, teaching us that it is possible to be happy and full of gratitude and to be fearless until your last breath. Lawrence Aimé Girard. Larry Girard was my stepfather. He had a 40-year career at Trans World Airlines, including being airport chief pilot in the New York area. He was a wonderful guy who played golf and tennis regularly and was quite involved in life. He was also a great storyteller with accents and all. Early in the 1980s, education about the realities of transmission of AIDS was still unconfirmed, and most citizens were terrified of it or of anyone who had it, fearing that it might be contagious. Larry was no exception. Early one Christmas morning, Jerry was getting ready to go to San Francisco to visit AIDS patients who were living their last days at a halfway house. He had a number of roses with him, which he was planning to quietly place by each person's bedside prior to their awakening. Jerry was surprised when Larry suddenly asked if he could go with him. Jerry, of course, welcomed him, but was honestly surprised as he was acutely aware of Larry's fear of AIDS. They wound up being at the halfway house for over 3 hours, and Larry spent most of the time observing and being friendly. The shift in Larry's energy was palpable. 3 months later, Larry decided, with the help of Phyllis, to start a halfway house where AIDS patients would be able to live free of charge in the Monterey area. Larry and Phyllis would also have people with AIDS come to their home as guests, where they would have dinner and stay overnight. Larry chose to change his fearful attitude about persons with AIDS, which literally resulted in changing his life in the most positive way. Larry's last 3 years of life, he became ill with Lewy body disease, one of the most common causes of disability and dementia in the elderly, with a general decline in physical as well as cognitive abilities. This was a very challenging time. Much to our surprise, Larry decided to go to an attitudinal healing support group for persons with chronic and life-threatening illnesses. While we never knew the confidential content of any of his many group meetings, it was obvious that Larry was receiving so much from his efforts to attend. We remember Larry saying that although he was a very private person, he found the attitudinal healing group to be an amazingly safe place because everyone listened with open hearts and were full of love. Perhaps most importantly, no one was making any judgments of anyone else. They were literally listening with love. One day, Larry came home after an attitudinal healing support group and shared what he had experienced there. "Today, I had an amazing experience," he told us. "For the first time in my life, I took off my last mask, and I cried and cried and cried in front of all the other people there. They just held me as I wept. It was a beautiful experience for me to feel that freedom and trust. I think I'm learning to be transparent and to not be afraid of what people might think of me if they know what's going on inside me." Both Phyllis and Larry demonstrated how we can let go of fear when we let go of judgments and the fear of judgments. Larry demonstrated that we're never too old to release ourselves, our fears, and our vulnerability, and that happiness and freedom can come to us regardless of our age and regardless of the state of our bodies. He passed on with much peace when he was 83 years of age. Diana Nyad. Diana never gave up her goal and her dream of swimming 103 miles of Florida Straits from Cuba to Key West without a shark cage. It took her 5 tries and 35 years, but she finally succeeded at the age of 64. She tried to make the swim the first time in 1978. But wasn't successful. So she moved on with her life and, she pursued other interests. Then after turning 60 and the passing of her mother, the dream sparked and came alive again. After her swim, she stated, "You are never too old to make your dream come true." Diana's a wonderful teacher for us all, teaching us that we have choices about how we see the challenges before us each and every day. She said, All of us suffer heartaches and difficulties in our lives. If you say to yourself, find a way, you'll make it through. We can choose to let go of our fears and perceived limitations. We can let go of our negative imaginings and start practicing positive imagination in our lives. Diana imagined that she could succeed, and she did. She didn't do it perfectly. She made mistakes along her journey. She used her mind to determine the outcome of what she dreamed. And although she failed often, in the end, when age and odds were radically against her, she succeeded not only in achieving her dream, but at being her very best self. Let's remember that there's power in the ability of our thoughts to create our reality, whether we realize it or not. Negative thoughts create a negative reality, just as positive thoughts help create a positive one. Let us continue to see value in our positive thoughts about how we relate to ourselves, each other, and to the challenges in our lives. Let's remember that it's only our own thoughts and attitudes that hurt us, and it's only our own self-forgiveness and love that sets us free. Arnie Beiser. Arnie Beiser was Jerry's roommate when he started medical school at Stanford School of Medicine in 1946. At that time, medical school was located in San Francisco. Jerry and Arnie became inseparable in spirit. Arnie was a great tennis player and was ranked 9th in the U.S. at the time. As he was about to start his internship, shockingly, Arnie came down with polio. His paralysis was so extensive that he had to be in an iron lung. No one knew if he was even going to make it. And when he finally pulled through, he was a quadriplegic. Arnie did not believe in limitations. He believed that your mind knows no limitations. He decided to become a psychiatrist and later had a private practice. He also became a professor at UCLA Medical School and later married Rita, his occupational therapist. He was very clever at not getting caught up in the fears and the limitations that others might try to put on him. For example, one time when Jerry was visiting him, Arnie shared the following story. He said a casual friend asked how tough it was to live his life in a wheelchair. Arnie's reply was, "I don't choose to go where that question would take me. But what about asking me to tell you about all the things I can do in a wheelchair?" He refused to dwell on negative thoughts or things. During his life, Jerry talked to him almost every day for 45 years. Jerry took him into his heart and mind and would talk to Arnie from China or Russia or wherever we were lecturing. They both shared the inner linings of their hearts together. Arnie taught Jerry what a true friendship is all about. For him and Arnie, it was someone who does not judge you and loves you unconditionally, no matter what you do or have done. Arnie demonstrated every moment of his life that your attitude is everything. Mother Teresa. It was our honor and pleasure and joy to know and to work with Mother Teresa and the missionaries of charity for several years. Much of Mother's great work was with the dying, the poor, and the elderly. Her commitment to being a messenger of unconditional love and peace spread globally. She inspired priests and nuns and laypersons all over the world, and she believed nothing was impossible. She was fearless. Whether she was with people who were dying or where she demonstrated kindness and compassion to those who were living on the streets, or when she was with the aged or the poor, She demonstrated unconditional love with a total absence of judgments. And through her love, Mother Teresa gave dignity and hope to all, and by her example, she taught others to do the same. Mother Teresa once said that one of the biggest problems in the world is that people are suffering from spiritual deprivation, and that love was the solution to every problem we face. Her message of love traveled across borders, cultures, and faiths. She believed that love was the most powerful healing agent in the world. She believed that regardless of what the fear was about, whether it was about dying or aging or lack of money, surrendering to love and respecting the dignity of others would bring everyone to a consciousness of love, peace, and happiness. Mother Teresa was particularly helpful to the aged and to those who were facing imminent death. She and her sisters gave the comfort of unconditional love to so many who would have otherwise died alone, helping them experience the power of love in relinquishing fear as they faced death. Mother Teresa demonstrated the power of how just one person can make such an extraordinary difference in this world. There is no way of sharing the great effect that she and the missionaries of charity and those with whom they worked inspired the both of us and helped to change our lives. Jack and Eulalia Luckett. Most everyone has someone they emulate and look up to, and we're no exceptions. When it comes to dealing with the mental, emotional, and physical challenges often connected to aging, Jack and Eulalia Luckett are our heroes. For over 40 years, the Lucketts have not only been our dearest of friends, but exemplary pioneers in their attitudes about aging and life in general. Jack, a retired Marine colonel, hero of the Korean War, and former assistant DA in Los Angeles, was an early executive director of the first Center for Attitudinal Healing in Tiburon, California. Eulalia was one of the first women to graduate from the Harvard MBA program. They've been married over 45 years. Eulalia is 77 years young, and Jack is 87 at this writing. They are, without exception, two of the happiest people we know, not just today, but throughout the decades that we've known them, through weighty tragedies and everyday life. Both of their lives have been directed towards achievement and worldly success. In anyone's eyes, they had it all. They had brains, they had beauty, style and status, money and success in everything they attempted and in their related fields. What more could they want or need? How about inner peace, joy, and lasting happiness? It's our impression that this is what they lacked. In the mid-1970s, they both sought and found a spiritual path that inspired them to change their lives. From lives of doing, achieving, and succeeding, they committed to living their lives without judgment and to giving and receiving unconditional love. They no longer pursued physical possessions. Instead, they actually downsized their living situation to live as simply and peacefully as they could. To many, this would seem like a supreme sacrifice, but to them, it represented freedom and opened them to joy. The Lucketts both know that their happiness is definitely a matter of choice, and that their peace of mind comes from a connection with a higher source and harmony and integrity in all that they think, say, and do. They know what they are, part of all that is. All of us have an innocent child inside, and Jack and Eulalia allow theirs to come out and play. something so many adults are afraid or embarrassed to do. They laugh often and can act in silly ways without being fearful of censure, disapproval, or judgment because they know who they are. And because of their uninhibited joy and exuberance, people are drawn to them and are nourished in their presence. Do not mistake simple for easy. They are not exempt from the challenges we all face. We've seen them deal with aging and illness and death and relationship problems, as well as the mundane difficulties of everyday life, just like the rest of us. The difference is that they've accepted the fact that they have the ability to choose peace over conflict and love over fear in any given circumstance on any given day. The knowledge that they have the ability to choose the attitudes they have about anything, anyone, or any set of circumstances gives them the unlimited power to decide how they're going to experience life and each other. That, and precisely that, the ability to make all their choices motivated by love instead of fear, generates a life of joy and happiness during the journey of aging, regardless of what the world presents to them. Joan Walsh Angland. 40 years ago, Jerry received a Valentine card from a person he didn't know. Later in the day, he reread the card and noticed it was actually an original drawing, not one you buy in the stationery store. The name on the card was Joan Walsh Angland. He decided to call Joan, and they had an amazing long conversation. Joan had sent the Valentine's card to Jerry after seeing a TV special produced by Phil Donahue. The program was the first of its kind, featuring children who were facing life-threatening diseases and were discovering new ways to handle the challenges associated with their diagnosis. Jerry had been working with these children at the original Center for Attitudinal Healing, located in Tiburon, California. Immediately, Joan and Jerry recognized they were soulmates and have continued their deep spiritual relationship since that first telephone conversation to this day. I met Joan soon after Jerry and I met and quickly fell in love with her. Joan has published 141 books to date that have sold over 50 million copies around the world in 17 languages. Two of her most famous illustrated books are A Friend is Someone Who Likes You and Love is a Special Way of Feeling. For more than 50 years, in addition to writing and illustrating books, she has produced greeting cards, dolls, figurines, glassware, and a host of other creative products. Many celebrities have been counted as Joan's devoted fans, including Eleanor Roosevelt, Queen Elizabeth, Cary Grant, Jackie Kennedy Onassis, Carol Burnett, Julie Andrews, Elizabeth Taylor, and the Emperor of Japan. Although many of her books are written for children, they are equally enjoyable and meaningful to adolescents and adults. We are honored that Joan dedicated one of her first books to the Center for Attitudinal Healing and the children who came there. In January of this year, Joan celebrated her 90th birthday. One asked, "How old do you really feel inside?" She said, "Oh, about 40. It's amazing how much creative energy I still have." Since her 90th birthday, she's already written 2 new books that are scheduled to be published soon. Joan has had an amazingly close relationship with her 2 children, Thaddeus and Joy, her granddaughter Emily, and her 5-year-old twin great-granddaughters, Peach and Rose. Much of her life now centers on nourishing her great-grandchildren and enjoying the love of her family. Neither of us have ever experienced Joan with a negative judgment toward anyone. Her heart is full of goodness. Her enthusiasm for life and her caring about others is beyond measure. Whether she's with an old friend or a new acquaintance, the loving energy that comes from her heart makes that person feel like this is the most important moment in Joan's life. It's not always been an easy, unchallenging life for Joan. Her son died at an early age, and later her husband Bob. When tragedy happens, some people hold on to the pain forever, and oftentimes hold on to anger about their painful past. In our experience, Joan just doesn't get stuck in the painful past. She lives totally in the present, seeing herself as a messenger of love. She knows that's why she's here. She's totally unafraid of dying and believes that her true reality is spirit, not just a body. Not only is Joan not caught in loss or anger, but she's committed to seeing the light of love in everyone, regardless of their behavior. She is truly a light in an oftentimes darkened world. People tend to see that in her, and through her reflection, they can see the light in themselves. Looking past everyone's behavior makes Joan a love finder instead of a fault finder. Rather than judging people, she celebrates each person as a unique expression of individuality. There's a sparkle in her eyes that brings everyone who knows her into the center of her love and into the love that created us all. In January, a friend mentioned Joan's 90th birthday on Facebook. She was overwhelmed by the response to the Facebook post when more than 2,500 people sent her birthday greetings. Joan loves life. She demonstrates in an almost timeless way that love is our only true reality. It's easy to see that she's not afraid of getting older. She doesn't think of her age in terms of numbers or limitations. She keeps the innocent child alive in her heart and her mind. Joan is totally committed to her spiritual pathway and to celebrating kindness, patience, and compassion in all of her interactions. It's a blessing for us to be such close and intimate friends with her, and to have a relationship where the three of us continue to love and grow in our attitudes about aging. Joan does not believe that anything is impossible, and neither do we. Chapter 4. Spiritual Vision. As we begin our 7th and 9th decades of life, we do our best to shine our light and to see the light in others, regardless of their behavior. We do our best to remember that love is letting go of form and our attachment to a script for our lives. We remind ourselves often that we're not victims of the world we see, but co-creators and producers of our own experiences. Part of having spiritual vision is seeing past our own as well as others' illusions, choosing to see the light in others and knowing it's but a reflection of the light in us. We love using our old friend Fred Motzer's wonderful motto, "Let's go through life with miles and miles of smiles," to inspire each other and to feel better about ourselves and our lives. Spiritual vision is choosing to look through the eyes of love and not fear as we go through life. We know that our unresolved negative thoughts create negative experiences fueled by our fears, and that what we perceive in the world is a direct reflection of the thoughts in our minds. Spiritual vision is experiencing the world through love's eyes and not through our body's ego eyes of fear. More and more, we're remembering that the only thing that's real and that never changes is our united connection with our source. We believe that our spiritual vision has a DNA of happiness and unconditional love, kindness, tenderness, and gentleness, celebrating light and love, and seeing only love wherever we go, for that is what we are. It's celebrating freedom from our self-imposed ego prisons. For Jerry, utilizing spiritual vision is remembering that he's blind when he judges others and interprets their behavior based on what he sees only through his physical eyes. And he's sighted when he reminds himself that it's not his past or his glaucoma, nor is his identity limited to his body. The essence of his being is love. His spiritual vision is seeing everyone and everything through the filter of love in his heart and in his mind. Let me quote Jerry here. I've been blessed by having Diane as my spiritual partner, who's completely committed to choosing her spiritual path. Diane's been an amazing teacher of unconditional love, gentleness, kindness, and compassion, not only for me, but for so many others." End quote. There are some times when I forget completely that I have a choice in how I see the world. At those times, everything I see appears so real and so deserving of my judgments. Mother Teresa once told Diane and me that no one is always following a loving spiritual path, but it's our intentionality of going in that direction that really counts. At this moment, I'm determined to see everything through kind, loving, non-judgmental eyes. I'm legally blind, but my spiritual vision is getting better all the time. Diane and I like to be playful at the gym where we work out so that the exercises that we do will be less boring. So on occasion, I come up behind Diane when she's on a stationary bike and give her a kiss on the cheek. There are times that she'll do the same with me. Well, one day I came up behind Diane to give her a kiss on the cheek, and all of a sudden, I realized I was kissing another woman. But there's some humor here at the gym. I've been nicknamed the Blind Kisser. We know how blessed we are. We try to go through life with the goal of dissolving any thoughts of loss or separation in our lives. By enhancing love, forgiveness, compassion, kindness, and humor. Chapter 5. Aging with Attitude Guidelines. The people we know who go through the aging process with the greatest happiness and peace of mind seem to be following at least some of the guidelines we're going to list. As you listen to the list, you'll probably discover you're already familiar with many of these guidelines. We suggest taking one or two a day and imagining them becoming a part of your heart. You might want to write down on a card the guideline you're working on at any given time and taking that card with you as a reminder throughout the day. Here they are. 1. Choose to no longer see value in holding on to guilt. 2. Resist the temptation to interpret people's behavior to decide who is innocent and who's guilty. 3. Choose to make forgiving others and yourself as important as breathing. 4. Choose not to take yourself so seriously. 5. Choose to keep a good sense of humor about yourself. 6. Begin to see no value in anger or in making others wrong. 7. Decide to see the value of infinite patience with yourself and others. 8. Learn to see value in living your life based on the belief that love is the answer to any problem you have now or any problem you think you have in the future. 9. Start to believe that when you stop complaining about your age and about what may be happening to your body, your day will be more happy and peace-filled. 10. Be kind and tender to others as well as to yourself. 11. Be authentic, respectful, and have the same interest in others as you do in yourself. 12. Choose to live in a consciousness of giving instead of just getting. 13. Listen to all others, with no exceptions, with unconditional love. 14. Let go of all your judgments. 15. See the value in being infinitely patient with yourself, others, and the circumstances of your life. 16. Remember that finding things to be grateful for each and every day is the key to having a happy life. 17. Choose to live your life in grace and laugh a lot. 18. See the light in everyone rather than their lampshade. 19. Imagine that there's a 4-year-old child inside your heart who's playful and lives in the present, who can't tell time yet, who doesn't yet understand the difference between yesterday and tomorrow, and who likes to be silly and laugh and giggle most of the time for no particular reason. 20. Look beyond the body and see the innocence and light in everyone, including yourself. 21. Choose to be a love finder rather than a fault finder. 22. Choose to believe the truth that there's no value in worrying about anything, that to worry is a decision to suffer. 23. No matter what's going on in your body, choose spiritually to be fully alive and not half dead, and to celebrate your spiritual core inside your heart. 24. Make decisions by following your heart rather than your head. 25. Decide to let the sun shine in your heart regardless of the weather outside. 26. When you get stuck in life or in your head, remember that music can set you free. 27. Make loving kindness your song of the day every day. 28. Choose to have faith and trust in something higher than yourself. 29. Choose to act every day and night as if compassion was the center of your DNA, which it really is. 30. Remember that only the very strong can ever dare to be gentle. 31. By seeing the value of letting go of fear and experiencing love, you can find it safe to become transparent and translucent and free. 32. When you choose to believe that life is eternal, death need not be viewed as fearful. 33. If you find you're having a bad day, refocus your thoughts on helping someone else. 34. Another way of looking at health is to see it as inner peace and healing as the letting go of fear. And last, 35. Choose to make a decision and totally believe it that this day is going to be the happiest day of your life, regardless of what's put on your plate and regardless of the state of your body. Chapter 6. How we use aging with attitude. Jerry's in his 9th decade of life, and I'm in my 7th at the time of this writing. We don't look at age as a number. Rather, we choose to think of our self-identity as spirit, which is ageless. We continue to look upon ourselves as works in progress, striving to be in a higher consciousness by doing our best to incorporate and to live the principles of attitudinal healing and the guidelines of aging with attitude. We both strive to make forgiveness and letting go of our judgments, guilt, and anger as parts of our daily practice. We do our best to watch what we put in our mouths and what we put in our minds. We practice meditation daily, and we go to the gym 5 to 6 times a week for an hour and a half each time. We also start the day with gratitude and seeing inner peace as our only goal. We both remain passionate and happy about our previous expectations, feeling useful, focusing our lives on service, on bringing attitudinal healing to people who have requested it around the world. This, by the way, does not feel like work, but pure joy. We find all of the above works very well for us, if not always perfectly, and we're happy to say that we no longer have any fears or worries about aging. One of the most important practices that we've created to heal our own attitudes about aging is the daily way we greet the morning, shared in the following chapter. Chapter 7. A Way of Starting the Day. We've often been asked about our personal spiritual practice and how we start the day. We don't intend for this to be a model for others. We just want to share what works for us. We feel it's essential to start our day with a spiritual foundation. It renews us each and every day by beginning with a gentle way to greet the morning. When we remind ourselves how we want to proceed throughout the day, we remember that love is our only true reality instead of giving focus to our fears. This is a way of reminding us that in the real world, there's no past or future. There's only the eternal now. We usually set our alarm clock for 4 a.m. We frequently receive phone calls from all over the world at various times of the day. We enjoy the still and quiet of the early morning hours, and we use this time to devote our attention to our spiritual core. We're not suggesting anyone else should awaken this early, just noting that it works very well for us. Upon awakening, we lie next to each other on our backs and hold hands as we invite each other to greet the morning. In silence, we each give gratitude for another day of living and for all the gifts and lessons of the day ahead. Then we imagine the light streaming from that which connects us all, entering the top of our heads and slowly moving down through our entire bodies. Each part of us changes from matter into light. We lie there as beings of light, reminding ourselves that the light of love is our true identity. We continue to lie in silence, remembering ourselves as beings of light. Together we send our light to people that we know may be going through challenging times, whether with an illness or a relationship problem, or perhaps some other challenging circumstance. Then we recite out loud a modified poem from A Course in Miracles, which goes like this. I'm not a body, I'm free, for I'm still as creation created me. Today I want peace. The peace of creation is everything that I want. It's the aim of all my living here, the end that I seek. It's my purpose, my function, and my life, while I abide where I'm not at home. Then together we share the following affirmations out loud. And remember, this can be done by yourself, too. Our thoughts create our reality. We commit to making this day the happiest day of our lives, regardless of what's put on our plate and regardless of the state of our bodies. Today, we'll have no thoughts or attitudes or actions that are hurtful to others or ourselves. It's only my own thoughts and attitudes that hurt me. Forgiveness toward ourselves and others is the key to happiness. I am not a victim of the world I see. I commit to having inner peace as my only goal today, regardless of what's happening to me from the outside world. And then we say, your light is all that I see and is but a reflection of the light in me. Perhaps because we wake up with a lot of energy in the morning, we always seem to have long to-do lists each day. At the end of the day, with our lists still full of tasks, the temptation to feel guilty seems to hover above us. So one morning in meditation, we were guided to create a to-be list to celebrate our spiritual being as our true spiritual identity, rather than applauding our ego self, which emphasizes form, physical bodies, fear, judgments, and guilt, and is constantly measuring ourselves against others. Each morning, we say the to-be list out loud to remind us to hold ourselves and all others without exception as our highest possible aspiration. I am the light of the world, and so is everyone else, regardless of their behavior. Today, my spiritual being is innocence, guiltless, judgeless, interpretless, one that is all with life, spirit, not a body, the will of creation, formless, timeless, limitless, ageless, fearless, angerless, eternal, happiness, joyful, unconditionally loving, unconditionally forgiving, blameless, tenderless, kindness, holiness, patience, compassion, honesty and integrity, faithfulness, trusting and trustworthy, gentle, giving, grateful and generous, open-hearted and open-minded, trusting and trustworthy, loving, lovable and loved, translucent and transparent, unlimited and unmeasurable. I am the universe's abundance that allows all resources to flow through me into the world without any boundaries, borders, or blocks, in total service and love. We end our to-be list in gratitude for all the blessings and lessons in our lives. Forgiveness exercise. Forgiveness is important for our healing. So each and every morning, we do a forgiveness exercise in our minds. It's become a powerful tool by which we break any negative energy and release all negative thoughts or grievances we might be holding against ourselves and others. This is how we do it. Picture the face of someone you have a negative feeling towards or a grievance against. It could be someone from the past or someone from the present. They could be living or they could be dead. They could be someone you know or someone from the public you've never met, like a politician. Imagine the person's face as very neutral in expression, close to your face. Behind this person, there is a bright golden light. This light gets brighter while the person's face gets smaller and smaller as we say the following: I forgive you, and I forgive myself. I thank you, and I thank myself. I love you, and I love myself. And I release you, and I release myself. And the person's face disappears into a tiny point of light. We then go deeper into the consciousness of sending our light to those we know are suffering from disease or fear or a feeling of lack of love. Next, we get out of bed, shower, get dressed, and light a candle that sits on a bronze statue with both our pair of hands in prayer mode that Jerry created. One of us then reads aloud an inspirational lesson for the day. Afterwards, we meditate for 20 minutes, and then we spend a few moments discussing our experiences of the lesson and of the meditation. We then go to the gym where we exercise for about 90 minutes, after which we come home and have breakfast. During the day, if we lose our feeling of peace over something, we have a phrase we use to get centered and back on track. One of us says to the other, "Are you willing to start the day over again?" The other agrees, and with that agreement, we mentally hit a reset button in our minds. This brings us back to the peace we felt after we had greeted the day. It really works. On particularly hectic days, we've been known to reset the button 2 or 3 times. We find our morning spiritual foundation is a gentle way to greet the day, helping us remember that we can choose to make all our decisions based on love instead of fear, to remember that we truly deserve the right to be happy, and to teach only love, for that is what we are. Chapter 8. Reflections on Life from My 9th Decade. Jerry's been blessed by many spiritual lessons in his 90-plus years. Today, as he writes these words, the following lessons and reminders have come to his mind, which he shares here with you. Don't take myself so seriously. Laugh more easily and more wholeheartedly than ever before. Believe that nothing matters more than love and forgiveness. Love nature more than ever before. At 60, I no longer cared what people said about me. At 91, it's even better because I can no longer remember what they said about me. Unlearning is just as valuable to me as learning. Diane's mom, Phyllis, was so correct when she taught me that when you're in your 90s, you can get away with almost anything. I no longer feel embarrassed if someone points out that my zipper's down. I continue to surround myself with music I love and swing dance my heart out with Diane whenever I can. I continue to become more consistent in no longer finding value in anger, remembering more often that my attitude is everything. Be gentle with myself and others. Let go more consistently of any guilt, blame, and shame. I remind myself daily that it's only my own thoughts and attitudes that can hurt me. The biggest gift the universe has given me is the power to choose the thoughts I put into my mind. Rejoice that I'm no longer fearful of death. I'm happier when I believe that all form is but an illusion, and love is letting go of form. I am not a victim of my blindness. Experience that my spiritual vision is getting better every day. See no value in worrying. Follow my heart rather than my head. Make all my decisions without exception based on love instead of fear. Listen to the voice of love within my heart to tell me what to think, what to say, and what to do. Remember that I and everyone else are the light of the world, and that we are here to reflect it to each other. I delight in wearing my glasses that have love, L-O-V-E, printed across the lenses to remind myself and others to look at each other through the eyes of love. These were given to me by my two beautiful granddaughters, Jelena and Lexi. Practice going through a day and having no thoughts or actions that are hurtful to others or myself. See everyone else as my Siamese twin. As I love or hurt them, I love or hurt myself. Focus on giving rather than getting as the best way to live my life. Remember more often that love is always more powerful than fear. And see no value in negative thinking. I'm grateful beyond words that I stopped drinking in 1975, knowing that if I had not, I'd no longer be here today. Know now that it's just as important to be kind to myself as it is to be kind to others. Know how important it is, regardless of my age, to exercise even a little bit each day. And lastly, believe that I was born with a spiritual DNA of happiness. Recently, I spent 7 weeks at the Western Blind Center for Veterans in Palo Alto, California, to learn how to better navigate the world since I've become legally blind with only extremely limited vision. Shortly after I arrived, I stepped out of my room and saw a whole group of veterans walking my way, all with their white canes. 3 more vets with canes passed my room. For a few moments, I just stood there, and I experienced such great compassion for these men. Then suddenly I said to myself, "Jerry, you're blind, and you walk with a white cane too. You're one of them." In that moment, I learned that I need to be compassionate, not only to others, but to myself. I also learned to refrain from giving unsolicited advice, as it's most often perceived as an attack. Remember that ultimately I do not know what's best for another person. To discover, as David Ilili Kaperlik said, it's never too late to have a happy childhood. Commit to make this day the happiest day of my life, regardless of what's put on my plate and regardless of the state of my body. Conclude for myself that it keeps me in the present to give my love now and not wait for the future. I no longer wait for someone's funeral to share a eulogy about how much their love has meant to me. Why wait until then when I can call or visit someone today and touch another person's heart in a most meaningful way? I no longer believe I can be compassionate and angry at the same time. When I was 16, I wanted to be like Charles Atlas. He was a bodybuilder who had a course on developing a muscular body just like his. The ads for his book were in magazines showing his big biceps and beautiful women feeling his muscles. I wanted to be like him and attract pretty women too. At 91, I don't want to make my body attractive to women. I do my best to keep my body in shape so that I can be healthy and be a better vehicle for love and peace. Today, when I'm stuck in my head, I remember that music can make me free. Today, I don't believe in the concept of enemy, so I don't have any. In the early part of my life, I was very focused on my fear of dying. Today, I'm no longer afraid to leave my body. I know that I am spirit and I am free. I now focus on knowing that the purpose of relationships is joining, and the purpose of my fearful ego is separation. I used to think it was more important to talk with judgment and to listen with fearful, critical ears. I now feel it's more important to just listen with love. My new definition for insanity is that we are insane when we're not experiencing ourselves as love and giving that love away, which means most of us are insane most of the time. I believe that surrendering to love requires me to let go of the belief that my physical senses determine what's real. When I speak of my chronological age, my wife says that I'm priceless. So I tell people that I'm a walking antique. Chapter 9. Every Step of the Way. To age with attitude is to age with grace and be positive about life. It is to no longer see any value in hurting another person or yourself with words or with actions. It is to consider that death is but an illusion and a doorway to a higher consciousness. Aging with attitude is another way of looking at the world. It's to make forgiveness as important as breathing and to love all others as you would love yourself. Aging with attitude celebrates love every step of the way by living in the present and choosing to be happy, peaceful, guiltless, judgeless, and to be able to laugh at yourself and the world you see. Epilogue: The 12 Principles of Attitudinal Healing. 1. The essence of our being is love. 2. Health is inner peace, and healing is the letting go of fear. 3. Giving and receiving are the same. 4. We can let go of the past and of the future. 5. Now is the only time there is, and each instant is forgiving. 6. We can learn to love ourselves and others by forgiving rather than judging. 7. We can become love finders rather than fault finders. 8. We can choose and direct ourselves to be peaceful inside, regardless of what is happening outside. 9. We are students and teachers to each other. 10. We can focus on the whole of life rather than the fragments. 11. Since love is eternal, Death need not be viewed as fearful. 12. We can always perceive ourselves and others as either extending love or fearful and giving a call of help for love. What is attitudinal healing? Attitudinal healing is a cross-cultural method of healing that helps remove self-imposed blocks such as judgment, blame, shame, and self-condemnation that are in the way of experiencing lasting love, peace, and happiness. Attitudinal healing is based on the belief that it's not people or experiences outside of ourselves that cause us to be upset. Rather, it's our thoughts, attitudes, and judgments about them that cause us distress. In attitudinal healing, health is defined as inner peace, and healing as the letting go of fear. These are guiding principles in this groundbreaking work in personal, collective, and global transformation. The approach and philosophy is based on universal principles and forgiveness. People of all ages, beliefs, walks of life, and cultures volunteer, support, and benefit from the practice of attitudinal healing. History of attitudinal healing. The first Center for Attitudinal Healing was founded in 1975 by Gerald Jampolsky, MD. Attitudinal healing is a widely recognized, award-winning, replicable model for inner healing that's been used successfully for 4 decades, both locally and in over 60 countries, now on 6 continents. Since its inception, attitudinal healing has organically grown around the world, leading to the formation of Attitudinal Healing International, AHI. Its mission is to support all established, independent centers and emerging centers in their growth and innovative adaptations of attitudinal healing. The principles of attitudinal healing have inspired extraordinary strength in millions of ordinary people to heal their own hearts and minds by choosing peace over conflict, compassion over indifference, and love over fear. Attitudinal Healing International. The mission of Attitudinal Healing International is to support all established, independent centers and emerging centers in their growth and in their innovative adaptations of attitudinal healing. Attitudinal Healing International works towards a world where each of us takes responsibility for what we think, say, and do, and where we each feel safe, whole, and loved. Attitudinal healing gives us the powerful tools needed for making healthy choices, navigating successful challenges, and creating positive change. This is accomplished by our utilizing the principles of attitudinal healing, enabling us to choose peace over conflict, compassion over indifference, and love over fear in all aspects of our daily lives. Visit www.ahinternational.org to learn about and connect with this growing worldwide community. The website includes information on the many centers and groups in over 30 countries around the world, as well as on both online and on-site trainings. Learn about attitudinal healing global innovations and programs that make a difference in the world in the areas of health, education, addictions, institutions, business, and community.
Section 2 of Aging with Attitude. Dan Strutzel interviews Dr. Gerald Jampolsky and Dr. Diane Cirincione Jampolsky. We like to call them Jerry and Diane, on the topic of aging, as well as to related topics that pertain to their work in attitudinal healing. As we begin, Jerry and Diane will lead you in 2 prayers which they regularly say together, both to begin each day and to begin any of their spiritual work together. So, to begin, here are Jerry and Diane.
I'm not a body. I am free.
I'm still as God created me.
I want the peace of God.
The peace of God is everything that I want,
The aim of all my living here.
the end that I seek,
My purpose
my function,
and my life.
while I abide, while I'm not at home. I'm here only to be truly helpful.
I'm here to represent you who sent us,
We don't have to worry about what to say or what to do,
because you who sent us will direct us,
and we're content to be wherever you wish,
knowing that you go there with us.
and will be healed as we let you teach us to heal.
Welcome, listeners. My name is Dan Strutzel, and I'm the former VP of Publishing at Nightingale Conant. And it is my pleasure, my honor, to be your guide on this wonderful interview with 2 great spiritual souls, Dr. Jerry Jampolsky and Dr. Diane Cirincione Jampolsky. And on behalf of Nightingale Conant, and in particular, President Vic Conant, we welcome you to this recording. And we are convinced that not only if you listen to the words that Jerry and Diane will speak during this recording, but if you really take these words in and make them a part of your life, contemplate their meaning to you, and act on them, that it will do immense good for you and for the world. And I'd like to begin, Jerry and Diane, with questions related to your work on aging. You have a book called Aging with Attitude, and it's a very impactful book that talks about how to apply a lot of the principles of attitudinal healing that Jerry and Diane have talked about for years to aging and the aging process. And one of the most important aspects of aging is reflecting on one's legacy that you wish to leave behind. If you were writing a letter to the generation that will follow both of you after you have passed from this life, what are some of the elements that message might contain?
Well, I don't really feel like I want to leave a legacy. I think that my life demonstrates my spirituality, and it's all about love and forgiveness, really, in that simple way. That when we learn to not make judgments, when we do our best to see ourselves as one with our Creator and everyone else, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, I too feel the same way about the idea of a legacy. I mean, we don't think of life in terms of legacy. We're not the 5-year plan folks. We're pretty much trying to stay in the moment and find peace of mind, make that our goal, and have integrity about what we're thinking, what we're saying, and what we're doing, and having those lined up all at the same time. And our life has been a real journey to make our decisions based on love instead of making them based on fear. Not that we've always done that in our life, but now we are much more conscious of it. So if I were to leave something to anyone, I would say just be aware of how you make your choices. We never know what someone else should choose, but we know that there are choices, and there's about the way we make choices. We know the dynamics of that. And so for ourselves, I mean, we really are the only ones that we can leave a legacy for. It's like, how am I living my life? And that's really it. And if it influences someone else, that's absolutely wonderful. But mostly it's the journey every day. We're all equal students and teachers to each other. And in our work in attitudinal healing, that's really the core of it, is that everyone is equally valuable. Everyone's equally important. Everyone is a teacher and a student to us. And in every moment, we try to remember that. So whether it's a little tiny child or someone who's dying or a great spiritual leader, there's always something we can learn and hopefully impart. And maybe that's the legacy.
I was thinking that in my early life, my motivation was to achieve and be a success. That is no longer my goal in life. My goal is to be a messenger of love and not make judgments about anyone. It's either to see someone as loving. If they don't seem that way to us, then we like to consider that that person is fearful, giving us a call for love.
It's beautiful. So, Jerry and Diane, would you say that this message of really living in the present and not focusing so much on planning, for a wonderful legacy or thinking about, how every action is going to be perceived years down the road, has this idea been really the same idea that you've had since you met back in the 80s and since you started applying these principles, or has it become even more important to you at this stage of your life?
It's more important at this stage of life for me, but until I was 50, and look back at that time, I think I was extremely judgmental on myself and an awful lot of people that came across me. I don't do that anymore. I do see the light of God in everyone. So what I'm doing now is quite different. I like to think my natural self is the goal I have is to have the peace of God as my only goal. And we, in attitudinal healing, peace of God, not peace, we don't use the word God at our center because I wanted to have a place where even committed atheists could come. So we don't use the word God or spiritual words, but we do a lot of work in learning to help each other learn how to listen without judgments, the value of being still, the value of being kind, not only to others but to ourselves, because I think many of us spend a lot of time going through life judging ourselves and then projecting that out on other people and thinking that they need to be attacked.
That's beautiful. And Jerry, I want to build on something you were just talking about up until you turned 50, that you maybe didn't consider yourself a spiritual person. You talk about, I've heard you talk about your early conceptions of God, or what most people thought of God in your childhood, and then your awakening to that divine presence when you turned 50. At your current age, how has that understanding of God deepened and evolved from when you were 50?
Well, before I was 50, and a lot of my memories of what God was that he didn't exist, or I was scared of God, very fearful. I thought of God as a tall man with white flowing hair who would award me if I was good and beat the shit out of me if I was bad. Today, I realize that in my early life, in my not believing in God, I was very fearful of God. I was fearful because if I didn't do what my parents said, they would be very upset with me. And I remember my way of looking at life was almost everything I do is wrong. And so I attacked myself an awful lot. I was a kid that had dyslexia without knowing it, hadn't been diagnosed then. So if I'm taking my glass of milk, I would spill it. I was clumsy. I would bump into everything I saw. And I got in a lot of trouble because of those kind of behaviors.
Great. And it strikes me, Jerry, that there are a lot of people listening to this program right now who are where you were prior to 50, and if they have a conception of God, it is this divine rewarder or punisher based upon their actions in the world. They don't have a strong personal connection to God. And so many people who may have decided to become atheists have become so out of sort of rejecting that model of God, but they haven't gotten an experience of what happened to you at 50 and beyond. What was it that happened when you turned 50 and now until your age now, which gave you this new perception of what the divine presence was and this new connection to that? I know a lot of people are probably looking for that. So how did that happen for you?
Well, I was having a very special relationship with Judy Scotch Whitson, and what happened was that she called me from New York and saying that some people gave her a manuscript called A Course in Miracles, and she thought it would be very helpful for our relationship. And I said, well, what's it about? And she said, well, it's about spiritual transformation and God. And I said, Judy, you know I'm a committed atheist. I'm not interested in that kind of stuff anymore. So, no, thank you. She brought the script to me, I guess, a few days later, and when I was in California and she was, and she said to me, I know you're not interested in this, but could you read one page? And I didn't know how to say no to Judy. And so, yes, okay, I'll read one page. And as I started to read this one page, I heard an inner voice for the first time in my life, a very silent but very loving voice that said, Physician, heal thyself. This is your way home. In an amazing way, I felt that this voice was God's voice, and that my life was going to be different, and that somehow I was going to devote my life to helping other people. And to know, I learned that when you're helping another person, you're helping yourself. And that's how it all started.
Wonderful. So, Diane, now, thinking of your experience, you mentioned that growing up, you actually felt close to God. In the writings I've read about you, that you felt close to God, but you were often separated from God by your fears as you grew up in a home with domestic violence and a father's hot temper. Can you talk a little bit about those early days? And then how has your understanding of God evolved over the past 37 years since you first met Jerry?
Well, growing up, I always had a sense of a larger being, a power. I was raised in the Catholic faith, so we had many things to identify with. The Blessed Mother, the gentleness of that, etc. And I didn't feel separated from God. I never felt like God ever deserted me. I never, ever had that feeling. And I think that the faith that I actually did have changed from a theological faith to a broad spiritual faith. It was no longer theologically based. But I did have an experience when I was about 3.5 that I remembered as one of the more profound things that have ever happened to me. And in my mind, as this little 3.5-year-old, I remember having a moment of thinking and looking at my fingers, and my thumb and my third finger, I kind of rubbed them together. And at that moment, I absolutely knew, and I was saying to myself, somebody stuffed me inside here. This is not actually who I am, but I'm stuck inside this skin. And I remember being kind of like ticked off a bit, like I was like annoyed. I remember this so clearly. I was like, oh, no, I have to stay in this skin. And then I was kind of like resigned, like, okay, all right, I guess I'll just stay in here and do it. And then I went out and played. But I remember profoundly knowing that I was not this body. I was much more than this body. I didn't know what I was, but I knew that this was just like a costume someone gave me to wear and to live in this life. And this is where I was. And then I accepted it. But it was a profound moment. I never felt deserted by God. I always felt a closeness. And I think my mother's faith was always, she had a very difficult life, and she found tremendous comfort in her relationship with the Blessed Mother today. I would say the goddess, the Earth Mother. And it followed me, throughout my life. So when I met Jerry, my faith, which had been a very strong, more theological Catholic one, had already moved into being a broader spiritual one. As I went out in the world and I met people of all different faiths, I really deeply appreciated my original training, but it no longer was my theological basis. So when I met Jerry, he asked if I was interested in this thing called A Course in Miracles. Actually, I'd seen the books. I'd seen the books on the shelf in my mother's house in Pebble Beach in 1978. And I was looking at her bookshelf and I said, what's that? These 3 books, A Course in Miracles. And she said, well, I go to Salinas and I go to this group and we talk about things. And so I went to the group with her just to see what it was. And they were quite looking at really psychic phenomenon and other ways of looking at the world. And then I never thought about it again. And then when I met Jerry, he said, was I interested in this thing called A Course in Miracles? And I said, no, I don't want any more theology in my life. And then we never talked about it again but for the next 6 months, we'd have conversations. And he was just the way he said things, the wording, there's a specific way of saying things in the Course that in our dialogue, I realized, oh, that's what I think. I just have never said it that way. Right. And so gradually he had suggested if I wanted to take one of the books, and I said no. He said, well, if you ever want to, just let me know. So one time I went to his house and there was this version of A Course which had his blood all over it and it was marked all up, and I took it, put it in my desk at work, and for the next year or so, I would just pull it out every once in a while. And of course, it was everything that I was working with at the moment. And finally, we began to read it together around 1982. And we have every day since then, all these 37 years, we read it every day. And we've been through it, I don't know how many times through the entire course, maybe 24. And every time we come upon things and we go, wow, I can't believe that I actually read this before, because each time it has a new meaning because we've grown more. So my spirituality has evolved over time in our experiences together, as well as our spiritual practice of understanding more about maybe the way the world works and the way it doesn't, letting go of the misnomers that we had about the nature of reality.
I, on the other hand, had no close relationship with God. It was all intellectual and doubting Thomas kind of thing. And coming from a Jewish background, my parents drilled into me that if I ever ate bacon or ham, God would strike me dead. And I was under that fear till I was 8 years old at a Cub Scout meeting. And it was a breakfast meeting. And they cooked bacon. And my mouth got full of saliva, and I really wanted to have some bacon and be like the other guys there. And all of a sudden I decided, and I didn't think of myself taking a risk at all, I decided I would eat some bacon. And it really tasted good, but at the same time, I looked around behind me to see if God was going to strike me dead.
And coming from a Catholic background too, I can identify that with the meat on Fridays.
Yeah, eating meat on Friday. I would never eat meat on Fridays.
That's right. No, that's wonderful. So just building upon that, and what Diane was talking about too, where you're both together, you met in the 80s and were married in the 80s, correct?
No, we met in 1981, and Jerry and I I asked Jerry for two things after we started to get together. I said, one, could you never wear any kind of cologne because your own scent is so beautiful? And the second was, please don't talk to me ever about getting married until I give you permission to do so, if that arises. And he kept both those promises. And 9.5 years later, in 1990, the guidance came, yes, you can do this now. And I just happened to mention to him, I said, by the way, if you want to talk about getting married, you're welcome to. Because we were like married a month later.
When we got married, before we got married, we said, let's have a relationship where we don't go to bed ever angry with each other, that will resolve any kind of problems we have before we go into the bedroom and make the bedroom a sacred place. And we made a decision to have God come first in our relationship. And that was an amazing commitment, which we kept. We always thought of God first in our relationship. I don't think that has ever stopped.
So, Jerry, that's beautiful. How do you and Diane make sure that you always put God first in your relationship? What does that mean to you? How does that manifest itself in your daily life?
Well, first of all, we start with a lesson that comes from A Course in Miracles, but it's all about love and learning how to see the value in not attacking ourselves or someone else. And perhaps we can say some of the things we say in the morning, that we commit to having this day devoted to God, devoted to being happy, and to make this day the happiest day of our lives, regardless of what the behavior is in another person, or regardless of what the state of our body is. And that's a great way for us to start the day. And more recently, instead of watching the news, we've been watching Glenn Miller's music because it makes me feel happy, makes Diane feel happy, and that's how we start the day.
My experience is that we both have the commitment to have our spiritual path be first in our lives, and that we do that as partners together, but we are individuals on that journey, but yet at a higher sense, we're both part of that same being. So by starting the day, we set what we call our rudder in the boat on a path of recognizing the very first thing we do when we wake up is recognizing that we're more than our bodies, that we're spiritual beings. And we are committed to never using words as weapons against each other, and we never have in 37 years. But I think we're extremely honest with each other. And let love be the way that we walk in gratitude for the day. We both believe we're not victims of the world. And we have ways of communicating with each other that if there is a problem, we ask each other for help and to just listen to what that is. And we've developed some different things between us that allow us to keep an even course. And we're very forgiving. Desmond Tutu says, without forgiveness, there is no future. And we say, without forgiveness, there is no marriage. I can't imagine being with another human being over time without having forgiveness and an open heart be a big part of that. So we've become spiritual supports for each other.
So that's absolutely beautiful, Diane. It sounds to me, and as I was listening to both of you talk about your journey with your marriage and your spiritual journey, that those are both of a piece. It strikes me as human beings, and many of the things people hear often is, you need to set goals in all these different areas of your life. And your financial goals are separate from your marriage goals, are separate from your parenting goals, are separate from your spiritual goals, your health goals. And as I hear both of you talk, you've found a way to make the spiritual an integral part of your marriage journey. It's not separate. The two are linked together.
Yeah, I was, in my younger days, before I knew Diane, having money was very important. And I bought a convertible, a green Austin Healey. And I thought that was going to make me happy forever. And of course, as time went on, there were many other things that were happening to me where I felt guilty about and unhappy about, and noted that it was not very lasting physical things. The only thing I know that is last is the consciousness of our Creator. And when I keep my mind focused on that, physical things became less important. Not taking myself so seriously became important, and not making my spiritual path so complex. It's not complex to recognize the truth that our ego was invented to keep God away, to attack God. And I was doing that for a long, long time. But as time went on, the gentle voice of God became very clear. And what I learned to do is to not listen to my rational mind about making decisions. I learned to trust in an inner voice of love to make decisions. An interesting example of that is some years ago, I was lecturing in hospitals. I wanted to take some time after those lectures to visit important historical spots in Israel. And after about a week, I got another inner voice to say, cancel your reservations to visit Israel and go to Egypt. And I have nothing to do, and I didn't know what to do in Egypt. I didn't say anything after that. I was telling my friend Bill Thetford, who's together with Helen Schuckman, brought the Course of Miracles into being. I said, Bill, I think I'm kind of crazy. I'm about to cancel my reservations to do what I thought was really going to bring me joy. And I got this thing happening all the time. And I'm going to cancel my reservations and go to Egypt. And I almost think I'm kind of crazy for doing that. And he said, don't worry about it. Just do it and follow your guidance. Then I said, the only reason I can think that I could come to Egypt was that Madame Sadat has recently opened a hospital. And I'd sure like to meet her and talk about that. And I paid no attention to that. On the plane going from, in those days you couldn't come directly there, you had to go to Greece. And anyway, I began to read a magazine in English about the head of cancers. And I was doing all this work in cancer. And the guy was named Dr. Shabander. So the next day, I said, well, maybe I'm supposed to meet him. So I asked the concierge if he could find this person. He did. And I got a hold of him at home and said, is it possible to see you today? And he said, Dr. Jampolsky, this is Friday. It's a very sacred day. And I'm going to a party and in no way can I see you. And then there's a long silence. He said, well, your hotel is really only 20 minutes away. I'll tell you what, I'll give you my address and I'll see you for 20 minutes. And I went to his home, and it was like we had known each other all of our lives. He was in a very spiritual journey for him also. And he's about to go to a party, and he invited me to come with him. And the party was all of Sadat's cabinet. And along with that was a guy who's the Minister of Health. So at the party, I had a long talk with this man, and then he invited me the next day to come to his office. So I went to his office, and after about 30 minutes of talking, he said, I'm going to excuse myself because I have to make a phone call. And he came back and said, I've just talked to Madame Sadat on the phone, and I've arranged for you to have a 20-minute interview with her. And all of a sudden, I got goose pimples all over because I remember what I said to Bill Thetford, that maybe I could see Madame Sadat. Well, that interview didn't last for 20 minutes. It lasted for 3 hours. And it was amazing kind of joining. And what was important for me was not that I saw Madame Sadat, but what was important for me that I listened and became constant and consistent about following the inner voice, which I considered the inner voice for God. About a year later, I got the guidance to invite Madame Sadat to a big conference I was sponsoring in San Jose. It turned out that she hadn't traveled since her husband was executed. But the year had been up, and she said, "Can I bring my daughter?" And I said, "Sure." So she came and visited our center during that time.
A miracle is a shift in perception that removes the blocks to the awareness of love's presence in our lives. That is how we live our lives. We try to make space for the miracles to happen.
And lights went on all over the place.
They did, right. And we also have worked hard to simplify our life, to keep things simple, because I think simplicity is difficult for confused minds to understand. And it's been very helpful for us to keep coming back down, to keep it simple, keep it not ego-based, listen to what you're guided to do, and just trust and do it. And that has served us really well to have an amazing life together.
Wow, that is beautiful. Thank you both for sharing. There's a whole program in just that segment that you shared. A couple of things stood out for me during that time. One is the idea that there's a lot of people who are looking, and probably listeners saying, I've never experienced a miracle. I read about all these miracles. I've never experienced it. And from what you're saying, Diane, is a lot of it is removing the blocks yourself to be able to see them. It really is more dependent in some ways on you seeing the miracle that divine presence is already bringing in your midst, as opposed to a bolt from the blue that knocks you over, like Saul converted to Paul in the Bible. The other thing that I wanted to ask you about, and related to aging, is that a lot of people who really still might have this conception of God, of being a divine presence, of living in the light, of following a path of love and forgiveness and not of fear, but they still can't determine if the guidance that they're getting is truly God. Is that God that's telling me to do this? Is it my glands? Is it is it maybe my fears buried deep down that says, don't go here? That's saying that, as opposed to God telling me not to do that. Does age make it easier, as you're on this path longer and you're sort of ripening on this path, to discern divine presence, guidance, versus maybe guidance that might not be of divine presence? Because I think that might be something that is a stumbling block for people really trusting, is that saying, like Jerry was saying, I don't know why I'm being told to go here or to go to this, to go to Egypt, or go, that might be the stumbling block from them totally trusting that guidance, is feeling like, I don't know if this is God or not. How do you discern that? And has that helped with age, as you've been on this path together over many more years?
We can say that we get better with age, but of course it also comes with practice. Practice is part of that process of having one day sequentially follow the other. If indeed that's what time is, which I do question. Sometimes it seems like it's happening all at once. The idea of hearing an inner voice, I think that's probably one of the most asked questions people say, is it, I don't hear a voice, I don't hear this audible thing, what's wrong with me? And I keep listening for it. And, it's probably a multidimensional answer for someone. For me, there's been times where I've actually heard something, other times where I feel it, other times, I get the chicken skin, of course, and there's just an intuitive way of knowing. whenever I question it, I realize I'm in a place where if I ask the question, should I do this or should I do that? I now know that that's not the right thing to ask, because it's usually damned if you do or damned if you don't. Something's going to be wrong on either end of it. The question I ask instead, when I can remember, is what is it that I need to know? And then open to that. And it doesn't mean that it comes in that moment, but it will unfold. It's a deep, deep trust that there is a connection between myself and all others in the universe. And so I've learned over time, first I was like amazed that, oh, wow, I'm so glad I followed my intuition on my feeling on that. Or I knew I should have done that. I felt that, but I didn't follow it. But one of the more profound examples for me is, I always consider it such a gift that this was given to me, was about 10 years ago. And it happened on my birthday, February 3rd. And I woke up at about 2:30 in the morning. And I never really get out of bed or go downstairs to my computer. I never do that. But I was wide awake, and my guidance was to go downstairs. And I sat downstairs in my office, and I thought, oh, I'll turn on the computer. And then I'm thinking, why am I turning on the computer? It's just going to keep me awake. But I did it anyway. I turned it on. And then my emails were up on the screen, and I looked at it. And then there was one from my classmates, friends I've known since I was 9 years of age. And there was I don't even know what the email was about, but I looked at the heading, and where they show everybody's email in it? And I happened to look, and there was a name, R. Pryor. And I remembered, and I went, Roger Pryor. And I hadn't seen him since we graduated, which was decades ago. He had never been at the reunions I'd been in, and he was just a lovely boy. And I knew in the 5th grade, I thought, this is like a really kind person. He's going to be a really nice man. I remember thinking that, and then never passed my mind again. But I couldn't get him out of my mind. And I thought, why can't I get him out of my mind? And I thought, what is it that I want to say? And I thought, I want to say to him that I knew as a kid that you were a really good person. He was really kind and good, intelligent. And I knew that it's an age where I didn't see much of that around me. So I pulled up an email and I wrote this. I said, hi, Roger. It's Diane Srincione. I just want to let you know, I just was thinking of you. And I want you to know that I really felt the goodness in you as a child. And your kindness. Thank you for your kindness to me, because I was having a hard time in those days. And then I just signed it. I didn't hear anything. About 3 weeks later, I wasn't expecting to hear anything. There wasn't a response needed. 3 weeks later, I got an email from Roger. And he said, Diane, I was really moved by receiving your email. And it took me a while to respond, because you see, on the morning of February 3rd at 5:30 our time in New York, it's 2:30 my time, he said, my beautiful wife, Jan, of 38 years, suddenly had a heart attack and she died. And I was so moved by the fact that at that moment that you connected with what was happening. You didn't know what it was, but you connected. And so we wrote back just a little, and then that was it. And then weeks went by, and I noticed that none of the other guys in the class that he had grown up with was writing to him. And I wrote an email to them, and I said, I don't know if you know, but Roger's wife passed away. You may want to connect with him. And there's just like 6 or 7 guys I grew up with. And then when I was sending the email, though, something in my head said, include this other person. She was the gal I went to high school with, wasn't one of my close friends. I knew her mother had been sick, but I just wouldn't leave. So I'll just include Ruth Rourke in this. And so I just sent it. It was bizarre that I did that, but I did. And Ruth got it, and she started writing back and forth to Roger. Well, anyway, they're happily married now, and their life is like, I'm like their yenta. So I think and they say that never, ever, ever would have occurred. She never would have seen him again. She never would have met him. She didn't know him before. And now they're beautifully married together. And so I think to myself, just follow it. You don't have to understand what it is. If it's based in love and it's based in care and it's based in kindness, it's probably a good voice to follow. If it's going to hurt anybody else, it probably isn't the right voice to follow or the instinct. And I think it just takes practice. But now, Jerry and I really, really have come to trust at the highest level what comes to us. And we follow it, even though it might seem bizarre.
Most people who do the course ask themselves the question, how do you know whether this is the voice of God, the voice of love, or the ego? And what I've learned is that that's an ego question. That's an ego question coming from your doubts about ever hearing a mysterious voice from above. And what has happened to me around that, I've had that kind of question, but I've just decided that I'm not going to try to ask that question about is this real or not. I'm going to follow what I hear and make sure it comes from love. And when it comes from love, I trust that voice. I trust that voice. And I think I know what's happened to both Diane and I, that there's a difference of being sort of committed to God, sort of committed to your spiritual pathway, or totally committed. And I think we've reached a stage where, I know that we've reached a stage where we're totally committed, and that makes such a different way of living your life. When you're really concentrating and focusing on not making judgment, not letting your interpretation of someone become a fact. But see, again, what I mentioned earlier, that we either come from seeing someone as loving or that they're fearful, giving a call of help for love. And this comes to being in a political situation that we're in now, which is insane. What we're seeing is insanity coming from both sides, making judgments, making lies about people, trying to hurt each other. And I believe when we're on a spiritual pathway, we don't see any value in hurting other people, because God's consciousness is only love. That love is the only answer. It's the only thing that's real. It's the only thing that doesn't change. But all the other stuff that we see changes all the time. I know that we're living in a consciousness most of the time where it's ego and what happens to the body. But when we learn that we're not bodies is but an illusion. There's no death, because death is an illusion. When we start not being fearful of dying, we just see it going to another place, but not dying, because God is indefinable. So we don't try to define God anymore, but we really experience the God within us, the consciousness of love that never dies, the consciousness of forgiveness that is always consistent, no matter what we're doing. There's another story I can think of, and that is every Christmas I start to meditate and say, who should I call today? And I make a list. This one person I called used to be a facilitator in Tiburon, but now he was living in Hawaii. It was late in the afternoon when I called him, and we had a nice long talk. And then he stopped. He said, "I want to tell you something. I had no one call me today except you. You're the only one that wished me Merry Christmas. And I want you to know that yesterday my wife left me. And what an important message that was for him that I was calling. Well, my logical mind didn't make a decision that I should call this person. But when I was making this list, that came into my mind, and I followed it. And it turned out to be an important part of his life, of trusting in your intuition, which I call.
I would also add to that, Jerry, I remember questioning you, saying, how come you're calling him? You don't really even know him. And you said my guidance was just to call him. And it was extraordinary. It was really pretty life-changing for us as well as for him.
That's beautiful. That message, there's so much packed in there, but the message of trust, I think for everybody listening, is an amazing message, and it's something that I think most people, when they think about spiritual path, and I remember I was told this by a spiritual director myself, I come from a Catholic background, that trust has always been, within most faith traditions, the thing that is the key to being on a spiritual path. I remember my spiritual director told me at the time, in the New Testament, it only says, it's actually, if you count it out, very few times to love God. It says about 4 times as many times as they say love God, to trust in God. And if you go to the New Testament, trust is throughout. And because in his point, I think God, or for those listening, divine presence, understands that the real challenge, people can say, yes, I love God, but to really trust and to really give yourself over, like you say, Jerry, being totally committed to that seems to be the stumbling block for so many people. And I think you've shared so many powerful examples about how we can learn to trust more on our journeys as well. And Jerry, you also touched on something else, which I'd like to now start getting into in regards to the aging process, and that is the idea of death. Again, it's an area that even those who consider themselves to be very spiritual people struggle with in their lives. The idea of death, a kind of a foreboding feeling, almost a fear, not wanting to discuss it, doing things, behaviors in their lives which kind of suggest a running away from the idea of death. And I'd like to start approaching this topic by having, Jerry, you share a beautiful story called A Child's Vision of Death, where you discuss 11-year-old Greg Harrison, who was about to die from cancer. Can you recount that story for our listeners?
Sure. The group of children, by the way, how I started this center was with children who are facing death from cancer or some other kind of illness. I started the center also because I was still very frightened of dying. My mother and father were very concerned about dying all the time. And I picked up this kind of fear of death, if you will. And that was one of the reasons I started the center, because I remember a biblical statement from Jesus about, and a child shall lead them. And I felt these children would have some way of helping we adults how to look at life differently and how to look at death differently. Well, Greg Harrison was very close to death, and the people in the group knew that he was going to be dying probably within a week because no more drugs are going to be used. So they asked him, what's it like to know that you might be dead in another week? I so wish the guy didn't ask that question. It made me a little fearful. But Greg started to talk. And he said, well, I think that when you die, it's just like setting your body aside. It's not real. The spirit that you were born with is what is real. He said that he thought he would be a guardian angel to someone. And Diane and I both believe that he's been a guardian angel to us. So that was many years ago. He'd be about 57 today if he had lived. And we feel his presence in our life, saying there's another way of looking at death. There's another way of looking at life. And not only have the children been helpful to me in seeing death differently, but I feel that all of the children have been helpful to me. I remember a dream that I had of all the kids who had passed on. And it was like they came to visit me, and they were in a dance, like going in a circle, like Ring Around the Rosie. And they grabbed my hand, and I became part of the circle. And then they disappeared into light. And I always felt that they came back to say, "Hey, Jerry, you're on the right track. Attitudinal healing can really help people face life and death differently." So at this point, I really believe I'm not a body, that I'm free, that I'm still as God created me. I'm really not fearful of dying at all. I do believe it's like laying your body aside, which was never real in the first place, and then you're at one with all of life. There's only one holy child of God, and that we're all that child. We just have the egos come along to try to fight our belief in God, and that when we are quiet and helping other people. So one of the things that Di and I have a ability to do is to be someone who's dying and be very peaceful. And that might be it's not what you say that's so important, but just being with that person and sending peace and love to that person may be the most important thing we do. It's not what you say is so important, but it's really the quality of your peace and mind. There's another story that recurs to me, and that is a kid I was visiting at home. He knew he was dying, and everyone else did too. And he happened to be the first kid in the center that was dying. And I was with him about a half hour, just holding his hand in silence, sending him love. And all of a sudden, I had the guidance to say to him, "You know, I have a recorder here in my briefcase, and I'd like to ask you, would you be willing to awaken and tell people your advice about what you advise people who have cancer?" And to my amazement, he opened his eyes and took the recorder and said, "Tell people who have cancer and they think they're dying that they're really not dying. Tell them they're the light of the world. Tell them the only thing that's important, as long as they live, is to give love to each other and not make judgments." And that recording became a tape that continues to go to many people and find it very helpful. Because out of the mouth, babes come real healing, real spiritual joining.
So, Diane, just building off of Jerry's discussion about death and about that beautiful story from Greg Harris and A Child's Vision of Death, I'd just like to give a few of your ideas on how you deal with the idea of getting older, of eventually of death, how you perceive that in your life, and how your spiritual journey informs, how you look at that final stage of life.
Well, thinking about life and about death and about being in a body and ending in a body and going on and what is there and is there anything, I think that's probably a universal questions everybody asks themselves. For me, my journey's been very different than Jerry's. And I do attribute it back to my mother, who had no fear of death. And I always have believed that life continues on. I don't know what's there. I don't know how it happens. I don't need to know anymore. I don't need to know what is there. I just know that there's a there, and that we are all connected and that I am part of that, and I will continue at some level of consciousness. I'm very aware that I won't be taking my body with me. And I'm grateful for the body I've had all these years and my life, but death is a comfortable thing for me. It will come when it comes. And it's never, I don't know, it's never been an issue for me. So I'm grateful for that, because I think that we can live our lives in fear of dying in a sort of a desperate way. We can live our lives more laissez-faire, thinking, well, I have multiple lives, that I can come back and do it next time. I don't know if we do or not. I'd like to believe we do. For me, it's about being really present in the moment, knowing and listening to what I'm being asked to think, say, and do, to be as present as I can, to be as honest as I can with my own journey of uncovering all the layers of protection that I thought I needed to be safe, and realizing that safety isn't of the body, safety's of the mind. And in that sense, as I've grown older, I've become much more comfortable. I'd say within my skin, but it's really within my own mind. I'm really comfortable with my body changing, my life changing, with letting go of the things I used to do that I no longer do. Jerry and I have 21 years between us. So there are things that we've let go that Jerry used to do that can no longer do. And in that process, I've learned to let them go gracefully and happily, and to embrace the newness of being at these ages in our lives, and find a lot of peace in that. We have traveled 85% of the time in these 37 years together. And we've worked in 61 countries, and some of them a dozen times. Our life has been listening and following that guidance, and joyfully and happily. I'm very grateful, and never realized I would be so grateful for this time in my life where instead of double and triple tasking, although we know there's no such thing, we just do things faster and stop and go. I really like doing just one thing at a time, and I'm very aware of that. If someone asks me to do a second thing, I say, could you please wait until I'm done? There's a peacefulness about our life and a joyfulness that I'm really enjoying. So for me, when I turned 50 I felt like I took a giant backpack off my back, and I realized that it was society that I was laying down. And I know other women who have experienced this also. And then my 60th was even better. And then 70 was even better than that. And I love Gloria Steinem's phrase of people have asked her over the decades. She goes, honey, this is what 40 looks like. And this is what 50 looks like. And now she said, this is what 80 looks like. And I look forward to that. So I think the attitude about aging I really have gotten from my mother. She said to me when I was a little girl, well, I actually asked her when I was a teenager, a young teen. I said, Mom, my friends are starting to smoke and everything. How would you feel if I smoked? And she said, well, honey, she said, if you want to smoke and stand on the street corner and look like a jerk, she said, go ahead. I can't stop you. She said, it's your choice. I thought, well, that took all the fun out of it. So, of course, I never smoked. But she was kind of like that. She always let me make my own decisions. And I also about life and about death. She said, when I was a little girl, she said, you get to make all your decisions. If I think you're making healthy ones, you can continue to make them. If I think you're making unhealthy choices, then I'll make them for you. Well, that didn't take much to add up. And she always let me make my decisions. And I always made good ones, I think. So her whole idea, her whole attitude about life and about death was one that was really comfortable for me. So I'm grateful for that.
That's beautiful. It's beautiful. It reminds me of, I remember reading the author Carlos Castaneda, who in his novels, I remember at one point he says, you want death not to be something you fear, but it's like this friend that sits on your right shoulder that gives you wise counsel through your life. So it sort of informs your decisions in your life. And it seems like it does that for both you and Jerry. And I think it's a wonderful, wonderful example for all of our listeners. I think we've all experienced occasions when it seems that our thoughts create our reality. And that idea of thoughts creating reality is something that's you hear a lot in the what people might call human potential movement and New Age movement. It's something that's kind of a staple. The book The Secret many years ago talked about that. Of course, the original Secret we like to think of by Earl Nightingale talked about that principle. We become what we think about. And sometimes it's a very positive way that happens, where our thoughts create a causal effect over our lives. And yet there are other times when things don't go the way we'd hoped, even though we thought we tried to will a successful outcome. So in some ways, this idea of thoughts creating reality can produce guilt in ourselves if things don't turn out the way we had directed all our thoughts for them to come out. And this manifests itself in many ways, positive and negative. And Diane, I think there's a couple of examples of positive outcomes of thoughts creating reality in stories that you have shared. So one example would be a story of you walking on the beach one day, which you can share with our listeners. And another positive example would seem to have been your story of a shift in perception in which Jerry's eye infection miraculously got better over 2 days and delayed his blindness for many years. Can you share those stories in terms of how our thoughts can create a positive outcome?
Well, I don't think the stories are so much that our thoughts can create a positive outcome. I know that the whole idea of manifesting, that we can manifest positive or negative things. For me, it's trying to listen to what it is I need to know and then be present with it, more than using my will, my ego will, to make something happen in the world. But one of the funniest stories is that, we both, Jerry and I, believe that we are responsible for the reality that we perceive in the world and the way we perceive the world. And a shift in perception, can change that. But Jerry and I really, we love to take a walk on the beach when we're near the water, and we lived in Hawaii on and off for many, many years, and in Kailua on Oahu. And we like to go before the sun comes up in the morning. We have an agreement that, we'll be quiet and relate to nature all the way and just think about spiritual things on the way. And on the way back, we can talk about if there's something else that's on our mind.
You left out the fact that when we get to the end of the beach, we kiss each other. That's part of the
Well, you're like telling everything, Jerry. Okay. We do. You're right. That's our reward. We kiss each other. Always. And but one day we began on the second half of the walk, and I shared with Jerry, I had some angry feelings that I was holding on to, and it was regarding something that happened to me 3 different times. And it was a business thing. And I said, Jerry asked, did I really believe that my thoughts, created my reality? And I kind of knew intellectually that this, his question was valid, but my emotions were kind of running high. And I responded in a little loud voice, and I said, well, not this time. This is the exception. Then I said something I've rarely ever used this expression, but I said to Jerry, I feel like I got shit on. That I got dumped on 3 different times in a row. Within a nanosecond, I swear it was just my next step. Literally, as I moved forward, this big glob of bird shit came right out of the sky and landed on my left breast. I was wearing a bathing suit that was kind of crossed over with no straps. And I looked down. I all the years I've been walking on a beach, nothing like that ever happened. I looked down, I looked at the glob of shit, And I looked over at Jerry quickly, and Jerry said to me, I hope you noticed, Diane, the bird didn't shit on me. So we both burst out laughing, and I said, okay, I get it. My thoughts do create my reality. I said to the universe, but it's so many times in my life, the action and the reaction have gotten closer and closer and closer together. In years past, I would do something and then I'd notice it later. Now it's within literally a nanosecond. And I'll tell you another quick story that I've rarely ever shared, but Jerry knows of it. I had a ring, an inexpensive ring. It looked like a sundial. I really loved it. And I thought, oh, I love this ring. And one day I said, it's like I have to watch what I'm attached to in my reality, because it always gets pulled right away, boom. And I love this. I love this ring. And someday I'll have a more expensive ring made like this. And I thought, yes, I really, really, really love this. I want to hold on to this. And I went down to my office and I sat down at my desk. And as I sat there, I put my hand on the desk and the ring fell apart into 3 pieces right off my hand. Just fell apart. And I looked at it and I went, okay, I get it. And then the next day, Jerry and I were meditating and I go, honey, I love you very much, but I want the universe to hear I'm not attached to Jerry. I'm not attached to him. So I think I feel very close to the creation of my own reality, because I know that as I see the world, I can shift and change it at any moment by the way that I look at the world. And so in that sense, I believe that I create my reality. I do also believe that as beings, we are very powerful and we create the world around us that we see. So that if I didn't believe that, I would think I was a victim of the world. And even though things happen to me or happen to people that are horrific, it's not like you said, oh, I want this to happen to me. But it's a matter of when things happen to us, what does it mean? What do we do with that? Can we turn it into something that is meaningful for us, or do we just wind up caving into being a victim of the world? So for me, I know that I create the reality around me, and I've had hundreds of experiences of it.
So let me throw out a challenge now, and it's maybe a challenge that you've heard people. I've heard this challenge before as well. There are times, and let's just take the story I alluded to of a shift in perception, where Jerry had this miraculous healing of an eye infection, and yet eventually he did end up going legally blind. There's other people who have come to me, well, Dan, I've heard a lot of stories about miracles of people healing from illnesses, but I haven't seen any amputees with new limbs, for example, I had one friend tell me one time, suggesting in a certainly very sort of skeptical way that there are limits, that there are limits to what thoughts creating a reality can accomplish. So how do you look at that? Do you feel that there are limits for how far that can go? Do you feel guilty at times if things don't go as far as you want them to? And whether it's thoughts creating reality, whether it's people associating with praying for someone fervently and not getting the result that they'd hoped for? Or do you feel that skeptical person looking at that is simply, again, closing their eyes to the potential miracle in front of them? How do you perceive that evident limit to the idea of thoughts creating reality?
There's a woman who was visiting the center every week. She became blind very soon after she was born. And she carried a grievance against her parents for not taking her to see a doctor sooner. My work with her had nothing to do with making her come sighted again, but it had to do with what we thought would be inner peace. That inner peace could come from letting go of her grievances, to forgive. And she finally was able to do this completely, absolutely completely. There's no anxiety or grievance at all. And then she moved to Seattle. And about 6 months later, her vision started to come back. It came back so well that she was able to drive a car. And she took a trip to visit me in Tiburon. And we went out to lunch, and I had tears in my eye all the way to the restaurant, and she was very peaceful and happy. Again, my goal was to help her be more peaceful by forgiving her parents. Wasn't a goal of her seeing again. But I think when we let go of our grievances, oftentimes miracles happen.
That is powerful. So would it be fair to say, and Diane, maybe you can address this, that when we talk about our thoughts creating reality, there can be a sense in which it could almost, in some ways, if it's not coming from spirit, it can almost be some ways ego-driven in the sense that we want to change reality. So for example, let's say I am an amputee. Okay, I don't have a right arm. So the idea of focusing my thoughts on developing a right arm, if you will, or some miracle of changing the laws of nature, the laws of God around, is in some ways, it's a projection of ego, whereas our thoughts creating our reality, which is our thoughts, how we perceive that situation of being without a limb, and whether that's limiting or not, whether there is something there to teach us, that's the lesson of thoughts creating reality, that thoughts creating reality is really taking whatever reality we've been presented with in our life and creating a miracle in how we perceive that. Would you say that that's more the divine way of looking at it, as opposed to I'm going to direct my thoughts for something to go the way I want it to go?
Well, that's a very good preamble to it. I think, for me, I want to have absolutely no judgment whatsoever on how anyone holds that question, because everybody's experiences are different. And it's multidimensional about creating your own reality. And it's not just one way of it. And if people pray and they meditate and they wish for things to occur, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. There's this big question of, and this is why I think Jerry lost his faith originally when a 16-year-old friend of his was killed in a car accident. How can there be a loving God if this happens? And how much intervention is there? I can only go from what I've deduced in my time on this planet. So I would share that. Is that I think there is a loving source that connects all of us, and the journey of life as a human being is a learning one. We're constantly learning and evolving. And that one of the greatest gifts we have is free will and choice. And we may not have free will about what we physically do in the world. We may be restrained. We may be walking on the line to Auschwitz. It could be anything. But inside, in our own minds and our own hearts, we have those choices. And that's where free will lives to me with the brightest source. And that is, I have free will with the thoughts that I put into my mind. And my mind then determines, how I'm going to live my life. Yes, I think that we are very powerful. We are so much more powerful as human beings than we think we are. Because I think angry, hateful thoughts really have a lot of power also. I used to do something called remote viewing as a child, as a game. all growing up. And I know that you can make another person sick. I know you can have these kinds of effects on people. The question is that what I'm here to do? Is that what I'm here to use my abilities for? And to me, there's a great responsibility that we have for our own thoughts. People think it's just the actions. Well, no, it's actually your thoughts that create your actions. Body follows mind. Mind does not follow body. And attitudinal healing is very much about being responsible for our own thoughts. Not blame, not judgment, not shame, but responsibility. Responsibility has great freedom in it. Because once you take the responsibility, it means you can do something about it. And that you're not like a victim of the world around you. So I think we can spend our lives, yes, we can set the goals, and we know how possible it is to achieve great things in the world by sheer use of will. And I think Jerry and I have two of the strongest wills that I know. That's why the journey's been so interesting, to look at the will and see what it is for what it is. And our task has been to really listen to what it is that I need to think, say, and do, and then use those abilities, to help that manifest, but not to be attached to the results, to trust that there's a larger plan. There's a phrase that everything has its own perfection in this time. And so if I can look for that perfection in what's occurring, Jerry and I, unlike many people, we don't ignore what's going on in the world. We go see it head on. That's why we've worked in so many countries, in so many disaster areas, war zones, people that are dying, and then to still see beyond what the physical world holds for us. So there's, someone says right use of will. Well, everybody's got the way that they want to use their will, and that's their own business, and that's their evolution. But for me, it's being aware of, yes, I can create anything that I want. What is it that I want? And I really want peace of mind. I want to have an integrity and a harmony in what I think and what I say and what I do. I want to be present. I want to listen. I want to respond to what is right in front of me, and not be caught in the next goal and the next goal out there. I know how to achieve goals very well. At businesses, I've been in, all the different things I've done in my life. That's no longer what I do. Now it's like I really want to listen, to be very, very, very present, because in that moment, that singular tiny moment that you meet up with another human being or have an experience is like so precious. It's like everything is in that moment. So I think that depending on wherever anyone is in their lifetime, how they use their goals. I mean, if they're 22 years old, they just graduated from college, they want to figure out how to make a living. I mean, there's all sorts of ways we use it. I have no judgment on it. But for me, the right use of my will is to use it for love and kindness and sharing and growing.
Your question was all about the body. Had to do with the body. Can you make it live longer? And da-da-da-da-da. Again, I'd like to remind you that our attitudinal healing is not dealing with bodies and bodies living longer. That's the medical model does. Our model is health is inner peace, and healing is letting go of fear. Many people that we see find leaving their body not painful because they're in that goal of wanting peace of mind every step of the way. So it's true that we can, under certain circumstances, there's a woman I remember who had stage 4 cancer, and her doctor said, you'd have to prepare that you're going to be not here in another 2 months. And she said, well, you can think what you want to think, but my daughter is getting married at Christmas time, and I'm going to live so I can see her and then pass away. The doctor died a month later, and she lived till Christmas and then passed away.
I think that, in this whole idea, Jerry, you bring up a really good point that in our work, it's not about healing bodies, it's about healing the mind. And that's That's a really
That's key.
That's a really key thing. So, and I think praying for something to happen, praying for someone, whatever it is wonderful. The key is how attached to it we are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the path of Buddhism teaches us that really well. If you let go of your attachment to the result, you can freely continue to give your love and your care and your forgiveness in the world, as long as you're not attached to, it's the ego that gets attached to something happening the way that I want. And it also, I think, is based on whether you believe there's a loving God or a punishing God or a punishing force in the universe. So guilt and blame and shame and all that is all kind of hooked up together. And so if someone says, well, I have all these things going on, those are the things we need to deal with, I think, first, before you can release and say, oh, wait a minute, that's right. It's like everyone does the very, very best they can with what they have.
You might be interested in if someone is facing the possibility of death, and I tell them I will meditate for you and I'll send you love and peace. I think love and peace are very powerful healers, because the most important thing I think a person can heal from someone dying is not to experience separation. Our work is about healing the illusion of separation through forgiveness. It's making love more important than fear. The only two emotions, love or fear. Which do we want to experience?
On the subject of wanting bodies to get better as a goal, during the AIDS pandemic, Jerry and I worked for 10 years in 30 countries doing AIDS education. But one of the things I did at home was that I was one of the facilitators in the AIDS support groups at the Center for Attitudinal Healing in Tiburon, which was the first place in the world to have them. And the group was all guys, and they all had, they weren't just HIV, they had AIDS. And, in the course of the years, we had 81 of them die. And so we faced a lot of questions about life and death, etc. And so many, when they came, were in such pain and such emotional pain. And a lot of it was because of the judgments that society or their church or their families had placed on them. Many of them had been rejected by their fundamental families. And it was heart-wrenching. Over time, what these beautiful young men taught me was the power of that second principle of attitudinal healing, that instead of, even though they worked for their health to be better, instead of having the goal of staying alive, they adopted the goal of making their health, having true inner peace through forgiveness, and healing as the letting go of fear before they died. And they were amazing. It brought that whole principle to life for me in a whole new way. So even though their bodies were racked with AIDS, and as some people's bodies are racked with cancer or what, that because the body is not surviving in a certain way doesn't mean someone is a failure. It means the body has been the lesson, the task. And so many of them died with great inner peace. And they had healed their hearts because they had forgiven their families. They had forgiven their religious training. They had really forgiven their partner that gave them the AIDS. They had forgiven the world.
They'd forgiven their bodies also.
They forgave their bodies.
Many people forget to do.
Yes, absolutely. We forget that that's one of the great things we need to forgive in this world, is for our bodies not being that which we want them to be. They were such powerful teachers to me. I will always be grateful to these young men in their living and in their dying, and the privilege of being close to them. But more than that, to really understand what it means to have the goal, not of living better or getting healthier or living longer, but have true inner peace and true healing. They were healed and whole when they passed from this life.
That's beautiful. I think I'm going to let our listeners just stew on that and not even comment further, because I think there's so much beauty in what you both have just shared with us. And as we wrap up this segment that deals with aging with attitude and these questions around the fear of death, around thoughts creating reality, around guilt and so forth. I'd like to share a segment from Goodbye to Guilt that speaks to all of these ideas. And I'll just share this segment, and then if Jerry or Diane, if you'd like to comment further, please do. We are convinced that we will never have peace of mind as long as we think that the body is our only identity and that we are fearful of death. The greatest threat the ego holds over us is the fear of death, which causes interference of listening. As long as you identify with your body, fear and guilt will be lodged somewhere in your mind, even though it might be disguised and not in your conscious awareness. Guilt always results in an attack on yourself or someone else. It's guilt that reinforces the ego's belief that there is a past, present, and future, a time sequence in which the death of the body is equated with the end of life. The ego keeps you preoccupied with efforts to control others and the world around you in an attempt to deny your fear of death. In love's belief system, death is believed to be the transition from form to formlessness. In the state of formlessness, life and love are the same, and they continue forever. They don't come to an end when the costume of the body is just put aside. When you are free of guilt, you are living each instant as if it were timeless, with the knowledge that you are love, that you are life, that you are eternal, because God is eternal. When you are free of guilt, there is no fear of death.
So many of the religious traditions in the world use guilt as a way of encouraging people to behave in a certain way, as do many parents, etc. And in so many ways, it becomes a part of the fabric of a lot of our lives, that we think if we're a good person, we're going to feel guilty about what we've done. And when we say, goodbye to guilt or the absence of guilt, it doesn't mean the absence of conscience. It has nothing to do with conscience. Guilt, to me, as a psychologist, is that guilt is a manipulative tool that we use to try to control another person or ourselves. And guilt is then often the place where we hide out. I always think of a corner of a room. So if I'm guilty, I'm facing the corner and I'm just, okay, I'm guilty. I'm guilty. I'm hiding out. I'm guilty. It means you do nothing. Staying with feeling guilty doesn't mean you don't feel remorse about something, but to feel guilty about something and to stay guilty all these years over your lifetime, keeping you from so many other things, is that place where you hide out is literally a hideout. It's not until you turn and say, I want to see this differently. And there's a really important question that actually Jerry asked me decades ago, on one of the first times that we were out together. I'll never forget, we were in Bodega Bay having lunch, and he was writing the book Goodbye to Guilt and asking everybody he knew what they felt guilty about, making everybody absolutely nuts. But it was very helpful. And we were sitting at lunch, and he said to me, well, Diane, what do you feel most guilty about? And I just kind of came back and said, I don't really feel guilty, about anything. And of course, Sherry, in his nice way, he was just quiet for a couple of minutes. And then what came in my head shocked me, absolutely shocked me. I said, oh my God, what I feel most guilty about is wanting my father to have been someone other than who he was. It blew my mind, because that had been running my life for so many decades. And when I said it, it was like, oh, this is my path to healing. So I think that what we feel guilty about in our lives gives us real grist for the mill to bring it up, to look at it, to reevaluate it, to forgive ourselves, to forgive those around us. It's a powerful tool. We want to make sure we use it and it doesn't use us.
That's great. That's beautiful.
Talking about our purpose in life is really an important question. And our purpose is to let go of any value in guilt, let go of any value in grievances, and see our only reality in life is love, and to experience the love that we send to other people. It's not about changing people. We remind ourselves that we're spiritual beings and not bodies. If you believe you're a body, then you feel that, well, sooner or later you're going to die, and that's the end of life, and you'll be separated from everyone. We don't believe that.
You bring up the subject of separation, Jerry. In all the years that we've done so many workshops and the people that we've met, one of the things that has been amazing to us is that it seems like everybody's problems are really different. A parent who has a child who's ill, they're afraid of losing that child. If we love someone and they don't love us back, or if we're married and then we get divorced, if we have a job and we're losing our job, it seems like these problems are all really different. If there's a war. And I thought there must be something common in all of these things. And what we discovered is that the one thing that is common in every single problem, without exception, is a common fear. And that common fear is the fear of separation from something or someone. Whether it's the parent afraid of losing the child, whether it's the one that you love and they love someone else, or you get divorced, or the fear of them dying, being separate from them. If you have a job, your fear of separation from your lifestyle, etc. Everywhere you look, within it is the core of the fear of separation. So what's been really helpful to me is to, when I do feel anxious or fearful about something, I ask myself the question, I've done this for decades now, what is it that I'm afraid of being separate from? Or what, or who is it I'm afraid of being separate from? And ultimately, what Jerry and I have come to realize is that there is only one separation, and that is with whatever the source is that created us, that we are a part of, by whatever name someone calls that in their culturally appropriate, tradition. That when you feel separate from what is in the universe, it then projects out into all these other places. But if you feel that connectedness with I'll say a divine presence, a source, creation, nature, God, whatever someone calls it, if you feel that connectedness deeply in you, that every other fear of separation can be dealt with differently, because then you know you are ultimately never separate from it. So again, it comes back to that place of trust, that intuitive way of knowing, but understanding the core things that we fear in this world, I think is really, really important. It's the first step to ameliorating it.
One of the reasons, in my mind, that there's so many divorces in the world is because we feel fearful of love. Being fearful of love makes it very difficult for you to make a commitment to another person, to have a partnership based on love. And fear causes a lot of difficulty in the world in so many different ways.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing.